Okay, good morning, everybody. I think we are now officially starting our meeting, and the meeting, just to remind you, is being recorded. And we also have some we believe maybe a member of the public, but also we have some observers, and if there are any governors watching us today, particular welcome to them. So thank you everyone for joining us for our September public board meeting. We do have apologies for absence from Angela Hillary, our Chief Executive, and Dion Mayhew, Director of Communications. I'm not aware of any other apologies, but if anyone has knowledge of any others, then please mention that now. I think that's everybody. We have as usual, are there any declarations of interest for items on the agenda in addition to our usual register? Nothing in particular. Okay, thank you. So moving on then to the minutes of our previous meeting, which was held on the 28th of July, paper A. Can I check with colleagues whether there are any points of accuracy that you would like to raise regarding those minutes? Everyone happy to approve them if there aren't? Yeah, great. Thank you very much. We'll take that as approved. And are there any matters arising that aren't covered in the action sheet that we have as paper B? No? Okay, thank you. And so looking then at the action sheet from the 28th of July, paper B, I think the items that we have, one is in progress as part of the board and committee effectiveness reviews, and the other is closed. I think there's a note in there explaining that clarification was received from commissioners that a business case is not being developed. So unless anyone's got any additional comments to make or clarifications to seek on those actions, we'll just note those and move on. I will just mention there is the forward plan paper C also available, which is obviously just showing you the items that we've planned to have on the agenda today and also anything coming up. If there's any comments on that, there's an opportunity to do that now. Otherwise, we can move on. Okay, so forward plan also noted. Before I hand over to Jean for our patient story, I just also wanted to take the opportunity to just mention briefly that we have slightly revised the agenda for today's meeting to the normal format. And the particular addition or change to the agenda is that we've added a people section, and that was really in response to feedback sort of that we'd gleaned through the board and committee effectiveness review discussions, and we thought it was a fairly simple change to make. And given that people is a sort of key risk, it felt appropriate to have a agenda heading that allowed us to talk about a range of people issues together. So that was the reason for that change. So it allows us to focus on key areas of risk. Obviously, any feedback on how that works would be welcome. And I know we've talked a lot about committee effectiveness and board effectiveness, and I'm sure we'll see some other changes coming through the board and committees as we go forward. So on that note, I'm delighted to welcome, I believe it's Claire, who we've already said hello to, and there are, and perhaps Lisa as well, I think, but I'll hand over to Jean to formally introduce the story. Thank you, Jean.
Thanks, Krishni. So yeah, really happy to have Claire with us today. Claire is used to work in the LAC team and is now currently on secondment into a project that is funded by Public Health, looking at supporting young people aged 16 to 25 with their emotional and other support to look after them as they move from care. So the project has been going on for about a year now. We've just received confirmation that it's going to be extended for a further year, which is fantastic news. Obviously, really looking for that to be a permanent a service that we're offering to the young people in county. So I'm really hoping we'll be able to develop that over the next year. So I'm going to introduce Claire, and Claire's got Jamal with her as well, as Lisa, who's going to be able to give us a bit more of in-depth experience or information about their experience of the service. So over to Claire, please.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Jane, for the introduction. So yes, I will just confirm I'm seconded from the Looked After Children's team for mental health to social care, working on the Leaving Care project, like Jean has already said, for 16 to 25-year-olds. Also commissioned to the project, we have the expertise of a forensic psychologist who is with me once a week. I still have regular supervision and contact with my colleagues in the LAC team, which has supported the access, shared valuable information and helped continue, I believe, positive health journeys for this cohort of young adults. The aim of the project, as already explained by Jean, was to improve emotional and psychological well-being. The original criteria for this was that the young adult would not be open to any other statutory services and would require low-level mental health work. In reality, this has not really been the case, and I have a lot of young adults open to me that are medium to high level risk and either are still working with NHFT or were working with NHFT and for varying reasons are now not. Our outcomes and achievements and compliments are all being documented and evaluated by the University of Northampton and are shared regularly with ourselves, social care, and with health if they wish to see them. I just wanted to give you the following list of our achievements to date. So we've set up regular formulation meetings, which are psychological understanding of the factors contributing to the current presentation of our young people, and we offer a safe space for a multidisciplinary professional to reflect. We offer trauma-informed safety planning training, which is enhancing the previous safety planning training that social care already have in place. We've offered sensory toolkit awareness and to date have provided 100 young people with personalised sensory toolkits, both at an open day we had and also in our sessions with young people. This increases the awareness of of the utility of sensory techniques and equipment for regulating arousal levels, de-escalating and helping people feel safe. We've purchased weighted blankets and body socks, which are demonstrated regularly to staff and young people who are also encouraged to try them. We've created mental health leaflets, which are now on Social Care's intranet, which increase the awareness of different therapies, which then hopefully demystifies the terminology to break down the barriers to accessing our services. We hold regular complex case panels, which are also multidisciplinary. They're held once a month and we regularly discuss at least 5 to 6 cases. We've created a Voices programme, which is a Stephanie Bovington programme. It's gender specific for women at the moment, and it's an empowerment programme which lasts 21 weeks, 2 hours a week. I have individual sessions which young people can attend, which are either formally held at Russell House or in the community, such as walking, going for a coffee or attending other health appointments. We've created regular arts and crafts groups, drop-in sessions for the personal advisors, and I also give clinical supervision to the PAs should they wish to have that. In discussion with sort of adult services around drug and alcohol services, it became apparent that the current provider we use was not as helpful as maybe it could have been. So I've had some discussions with Zoe Churchwood from Aquarius, who's managed to get commission funding for 6 months to offer further sessions for our young people at Russell House. I now wanted to sort of introduce you to JJ, who I really appreciate has come in today. He stepped in last minute. I did have another young person who was going to attend, but unfortunately they had a health appointment, so they weren't able to attend. JJ is a care experienced young adult. He's employed by NCT as an apprentice to the project. He's received support from CAMHS in the past and Adult Mental Health, and he also receives support from myself on the project. So I'll hand it over to JJ.
Hi guys, so as Claire said, I'm JJ, so I'm just going to go through kind of my experiences with CAMHS, the mental health services that I've kind of been accessing. So I think the first time I kind of come into contact with kind of CAMHS and stuff was around 16, 17. At that kind of point in my life, that was when I kind of come into care, and that was kind of a rough time in my life. And I think CAMHS didn't kind of kind of looked at me in a way that was like, oh, you're just a troubled teen, and they didn't think it was anything kind of mental, so I didn't really get any support around that, and until really later on when I kind of like got a bit older, started to kind of get into crises, etc. Then they kind of noticed that there was something kind of going on, and that's when I got referred into adults. So then I was with Luke, who's my psychologist or psychiatrist. I can't work out the two between the difference. But he was really, really good. I feel he gave me so much support with a lot of different things. I also had CBT therapy. That was godsend. That helped me a lot to understand my emotions and how I was feeling and stuff. And again, like Luke was giving me that kind of one-to-one support, just having that talk, which was really, really good. Was kind of the best support that I've ever had regarding my mental health at that point. That kind of finished a few months ago, but I've then got his manager I know from a different service, because of a lot of different other reasons, and she now contacts with me like once a month, around just checking to see if my mental health's okay and stuff. Obviously, then I've obviously started to work with alongside Claire. I've had a kind of bit of up and down during kind of the last couple of months, as well. So Claire's kind of been on hand regarding that. So it's kind of been nice to see it from a personal perspective, but also because I work with Claire alongside on the project. I've done like a lot of evaluations and stuff with the young people, and they all speak highly of her and the work she's doing. And I see it as well. She is great, and the work that she's doing is very impactful on young people that we work with. And yeah, it's something that we 100% need to keep and push on forward. It is a great, a lot of proper asset to the team and to the young people, which is the main focus. So yeah, I just think regarding kind of the support, I think with CAMHS and kind of being younger, I think they need to, I think it kind of depends on the person, and kind of their experiences. And me and Claire were talking about this earlier. I think for a young person to actually successfully kind of move on and learn and like better themselves and kind of get out of the low place that they're in, they need to actually be ready, and that whether that be in a stable placement, stable home, they need to have a stable environment. And kind of when my experience was, I wasn't in that stable environment, so I was not ready to tackle my problems as such. So I think that was part of the reason why CAMHS didn't work out in the first instance, because I was kind of like, no, I wasn't ready. It was a rough time. I was just got into care. Like there was a lot going on, and I just kind of felt like everybody was gunning for me in a way. So not just health, but like social workers, schools, everything. It was just a rough point. But now, being 22, I feel ready and I can do it and talk, and obviously having that CBT therapy as well, that really helped with understanding my emotions and how I feel. And it's also something now that I can also pass on to other young people and stuff through the work that I do alongside working with Claire. We have done something around emotion coaching recently at work as well, and that kind of ties in with CBT therapy, and that's really, really good. But yeah, I think that yeah, I don't know what else to really say other than, yeah, I think that Claire does the work she's doing is very, very valuable, and we need to keep her. We really need to keep her. I love working with her, and I love seeing the impact that she's making on young people's lives and their mental health. They're so much happier. they have trusted relationships with her. She's built these relationships with young people who are already in a lot of crisis and a lot of trauma and going through a lot, and she's still putting in that effort to make sure that they have the best outcomes that they can. So yeah, I don't know if anybody wants to say anything or have any questions or anything.
JJ, thank you so much. I can see that everybody really appreciated hearing from you, and goodness me, it sounds like, you know, you're a great advocate for the service that's being provided, and that's fantastic. And I'm sure Claire feels very proud about the things that you've said about the service that she's provided. So I'm sure, is it all right, Claire? Is there anything else you wanted to say? I suspect there'll be some questions that people want to ask, but do go ahead first.
I just wanted to sum up, sorry. So I just wanted to clarify again, this role is a temporary role and does not have any current clear extension or permanency. This would be such a shame, as I believe our current achievements are an excellent example of cross-agency working well due to the ability of the team members to engage with multiple systems, the experience from care leavers who are now staff of social care itself, NHS, private consultancy, police, housing, etc. The evaluation for the university will also help, I hope, to continue to improve emotional and psychological outcomes for this cohort and working relationships and professional development. And I thank you all for taking the time to listen to us today.
Thank you, Claire. I'm sure that board members really, and JJ, these are moments we always, I think, value on the board, because it, you know, it sounds trite, but it reminds us all why we're here, and that's to make a difference to people's lives, and in this instance, young people's lives, which I think is really important. I'm sure there are questions, if that's all right. JJ, are you comfortable to take a few questions if people have any for you?
Yeah.
Great. I'll just bring people in then, and I'll ask people just to introduce themselves. So JJ, Claire, and I believe Lisa as well. I sort of round the corner, I think I can see Lisa. I'll just ask people to introduce themselves as they're asking a question, so so you know who they are. Right, let's see who's wanting to come in. Julia.
Thank you, Krishni. Morning, everybody. I'm Julia Curtis, one of the non-exec directors, and JJ and Claire, this is not a question, it's just from the heart. Wow, you're both incredible. What an impact for young people that both of you are having. So it's a huge thank you, really. And just to say, being so open and honest, especially JJ, thank you, because unless we hear from people, we think we know that we're doing a good job, but actually, or you're doing a good job, but actually to hear directly from you is really powerful. And it is very brave to come and talk to a whole screen full of a lot of people and share your really honest experiences. So I'm sitting here feeling very proud of you both. So thank you for sharing, and I'm sure that you've really helped us understand the impact for young people in Northamptonshire, and I'm sure there'll be questions about funding and various other things from the others, but huge thank you for coming along this morning to share that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Scott?
Yeah, first of all, hi Claire, hi Lisa, and hi JJ. I mean, my name's Scott Adams. I'm also one of the non-executives at the Trust. I'm going to echo a lot of what Julia and Krishni's already said, but you know, I have to say, you know, the passion and the impact that you're making with the service itself, Claire and Lisa, really comes across. So, you know, thank you for that. You know, that's been a really interesting articulation of that. JJ, I just wanted to say to you, you're an incredibly impressive young man, and I hope you don't feel in any way condescended by that. Right? I mean, I think from my perspective, what really came across most powerfully to me, right, is first of all, your depth of personal awareness and how you were able to reflect on why the CAMHS experience didn't work for you as a younger man, and why, you know, what you're involved in now does. And JJ, I'm 54, and I don't always have that depth of self-awareness. So genuinely, I mean that as a really positive congratulation to you. I think the other aspect that's really interesting to me, and this is, I suppose, a question at this point, JJ, you were talking about some aspects of the work that you're doing now, right? And I suppose this is to all of you, really, but, you know, what was coming across was aspects of co-production, really. You know, your sort of lived experience coming in and helping us further enhance and develop the service. Just wondered whether any of you would like to expand on that just a little bit more, please.
Yes, I mean, JJ, and we had another care experience young person on the project who actually is now going on to have a permanent contract with social care, which is really great. Both will also, when we're delivering sessions, particularly around sort of safety planning or around emotional regulation, would come in as care experience young people and actually give their opinion of how what was happening for them at that time and how professionals might change their view. So they've contributed a lot to that. They attend all the sessions that we have for young people, arts and crafts and other things as well, because they can sit alongside those young people, but also remain that they're obviously in a professional role as well. JJ's given a lot of talks to heads of social care as well, who has quite a good relationship with Colin Foster, and does do a lot of co-delivery with him as well. So they do a lot with social care as well around their processes. So it's been, I mean, social care in itself, I believe, offer a lot of care experienced apprenticeships out. So JJ might be able to say a bit more about that.
I think the main thing as well is, I think, especially since I've started working here, that the trust kind of noticed that they weren't really doing a lot kind of with all the different services, weren't really communicating when doing work with young people. So we're kind of, there's people falling through the net, there's a lot more crisis, a lot more of stuff happening. So over this kind of last year, they tried to develop and grow them communications with different services. That's why we're having all these multidisciplinary like meetings and all that kind of stuff to kind of bring everyone in, because we are all corporate parents, no matter where you are. You know what I mean? You're directors and stuff, but you're still a parent, corporate parent to children in care, because they are going in health and stuff. So that was kind of the main focus, to get everybody in so that we can kind of work out what we should be doing to better support young people. And me giving my experience is like one of the first steps, and even that in itself is, I've seen quite a lot of change just from that. So that's why I'm always open to and happy to share my experiences.
JJ's specialism as well is housing, because he's had there's a lot of knowledge about housing and what the laws are and what they aren't, and he's done a lot of supporting around that with social care, and a lot for the young people to be able to support them when they've said, I've had this council tax bill, or I've had this, or this housing doesn't work, who do I go to? JJ's excellent with that and is a real advocate for the housing part in particular, aren't you?
Yeah.
And I think I would just like to echo, certainly as part of all the changes with the ICB and meetings that I've been attending around Care Leavers Pathway, looking at how we can improve those, the work that we're doing. Certainly young people are attending those meetings as well, and sharing their experiences to influence the discussions that are taking place as well. So it's been a really good experience from that point of view.
Great, thank you guys.
Thank you.
There's a little queue still of people wanting to talk to you, so I'll just move us on to Melanie. Melanie.
Hi, I'm Melanie Hall. I'm also one of the non-executive directors. Clearly, we're just quicker with the click on the finger button to ask the question than everyone else. Yeah, you've already given a lot of rich information, actually, in your last answer that I was looking for, because one of the things that has impressed me most was, as Scott said, the self-awareness, but just that reflection on your, JJ, on your initial engagement with CAMHS, that you weren't perhaps in the right place, but also people weren't looking at the whole you. They were just sort of looking at what presented in front of them. And that's a message that has resonated. It resonates with me, but also I think we've discussed many a time as a board about treating the whole person. So really good to get your perspective on that. And I guess a little question I'd add then at the end is, if there was one thing that we could do to support you more, you know, collectively, or support what you're trying to achieve more, what would you ask from us?
Is in what kind of way, in terms of like mental health kind of support? Or
no,
just
I mean, is it to continue the work that you're doing, engaging with all the different parts of the system, if you like? Is it more funding? Is it more people? Is it that we need to open more doors for you? How can we support with really critical work?
I think it'd be a bit of everything, to be honest. I think there's not one true thing that's gonna get it, you know what I mean, to a perfect thing, you know what I mean. I think there's loads of different components which could contribute, such as more staff and funding, and even right down to the personal level of the people that are working, like your professionals, building relationships with the people they're working with, just because some people, especially children in care, they don't have that. So that, and I think that's why Claire and the people she's been worked with has gone so well, is because she's worked and built that relationship and that trust, which a lot of people in children in care do not have that because they've come from bad backgrounds.
And I think Jodie's right. I think that would be, so I mean, there is only one of me. I've had the psychologist once a week, which has been great, but she finishes in December. So if I am seconded, there is still just one of me. And sometimes that can be really tricky, but having that also, that being able to come back into the LAC team and have that crossover of information and be able to share. Some of the young people I'm working with now are people I worked with 5 years ago, but actually now are in a ready position like JJ was to actually now engage. But because I built that relationship 5 years ago, it's now more stable to build on now. So I think that funding, all of those things, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think I know that NCT has secured funding for the post to continue until the end of December 2023 at the moment. And obviously from our point of view within NHFT and the LAC team, we absolutely want to support this project going forward. And Claire is seconded from our team. So at the moment, we are sort of kind of having to say to NCT, yeah, absolutely, we definitely want to continue with this, as long as we can find somebody to cover Claire until the end of December 2023. So that's our challenge, is we're going out to recruitment hope now to see if we can get somebody to come into post, because the person currently covering had planned that the post would have ended and she's going off travelling the world. So we need to look for somebody new, unfortunately.
Thanks, Lisa. Right, final two. Maria first and then David. Maria?
Thanks, Christine. I'll try and keep it short. I appreciate the time. I do think that the Claire and JJ just did an amazing presentation in terms of getting their messages across so well and so clearly in such a short time. And really listening to you, to me, describes how integrated care is supposed to work and what we should all be working to as a system. So bit concerned about what you're saying about the short-term funding around this post and the role, because I would have thought everyone will reap benefits, young people and also all the organisations you're working with, from this care coordination role that you're playing. That's absolutely essential. So I was listening, you said it was funded by NCT. I wasn't quite sure what that was, and just wanted to understand a bit more about the future, how we can solidify this kind of way of working in our system, and hopefully the analysis of the benefits by University of Northampton will help that. But I guess we need to make the case, really. But I would say it's a fantastic example of exactly what the system should be doing together, and the role you're playing is essential in bringing people together in terms of dealing with the individual person, but also seeing for the whole cohort you're working with areas we can improve the way we provide services. So fantastic work. Thank you.
I assume it's the Children's Trust that Claire was referring to.
Public Health England put up the first amount of money, and it's actually Public Health England to put up this next tranche of money. So it's actually not NCT. So Public Health England put the first amount in, and Public Health England, there was a spare, I don't know if there is ever spare money, but Colin managed to acquire some money, and he said he would use that Public Health England money to move forward for the whole of next year.
Great, thank you, Claire.
I think, as you were saying, that people will benefit from this. Claire and I attended a conference looking at outcomes for care leavers. It was particularly focused around COVID, but also generally, and the ways that people have adapted working. And there was certainly a lot of interest from other areas around the country about the project, wasn't there, Claire?
Yeah. Yeah, we've had to be quite imaginative with how we capture it, though, because obviously we've got fixed tools to measure that data, but actually some of this is quite uncatchable, if that makes sense. So we have to have been really, so we've videoed young people, we've had a lot of compliments from young people, letters, things like that. So we had to take all of that and push that into the research, because I think it's really hard just to have a tick box to say what we've done. So we are being quite creative with that.
That sounds good, Claire, because I think it's a combination of stories and case studies, and it's the qualitative stuff as well as any sort of formal tools that are being used, as you said. Right, final comment then from David.
Lovely. Thanks, Krishni. Hi, I'm David Williams, Director of Strategy and Partnerships. Claire, to add to your evaluation, a couple of things you've talked through today, which I think are really important. You've talked about people going into employment. And I think the success and the longevity of supporting programs like this is also about evidencing that people are going into work. And I think really focus on that, because that's benefiting the whole of Northamptonshire, because individuals are then getting paid employment, that's supporting them and that's helping them move forward. So really build that in. The other bit then I just wanted to say was, JJ, I was struck at the beginning about you talking through your apprenticeship, which is something that we also offer here. And I kind of thought, if I give you the last word, could you just tell us how the apprenticeship has boosted your confidence or helped you? Because that would be something we need to think about when we're thinking about apprenticeships in NHFT.
Yeah, so the apprenticeship has been really, really good. I think it's so before I come into this job on the start of this apprenticeship, I was not in a good place mentally. I was in debt. I was in arrears. I was just not happy. I wasn't eating properly. I wasn't sleeping properly. My mental health was up and down. And then obviously I've come into work, started working. So I'd never actually, I'll put a bit of context. I've had numerous jobs. I can always get a job, but I've never been able to stay in a job. I just can't, like, I just struggled. And this job, I was like, right, this is an experience, because I wanted to, the main reason why I wanted to do an apprenticeship was because I wanted to get an education. I dropped out college, didn't get my A levels or anything. And something that I want to do and achieve in life is to be like, I've got a degree. So that's my end point. So obviously I started this job. I'm now debt free. I'm now out of arrears. I'm now ahead with bills. I actually have money to live on. I'm more happy. I've gained weight. You know what I mean? My mental health's better. Stress levels can vary depending on workload.
For all of us.
But other than that, this apprenticeship has helped so much. The support from my tutor, from Claire, from my line manager, even from the whole team, to be honest, has been great. Obviously, I've needed additional adjustments for stuff like appointments and all that for mental health and all that kind of stuff. And they're really supportive with that. They've helped out. I've obviously had time off because of mental health, and there was one time I had a breakdown and I called the service manager at like 2 o'clock in the morning and bawling, crying, and she's been on the phone speaking with me, and it's like, that's the service manager, you know what I mean? But she's been there, and I feel like I'm more supported now than I ever have ever been. And also I think as well with when I had the CBT therapy and all that kind of stuff, and just talking with Claire and that, it's helped me so much. I think over this time I've grew and developed as a person, and my confidence is, I say better. I wouldn't say I'm fully back to the old JJ, but I'm getting there.
Brilliant.
It's a journey, isn't it? So
absolutely brilliant. That's a lovely example. Thank you.
Thank you so much, JJ. I mean, it strikes me, I think that's all the comments and questions we've got, but I mean, I think there's some really important points that you all have made, and particularly that the outcomes that you know, in JJ's example, there are a lot of really positive, measurable outcomes. And I guess in terms of David's point, it's evaluating in that context, because you know, all these developments within the NHS now are about improving outcomes for people. So if projects like this can support that, then obviously that's really important. And just a thought for David and Jean. I mean, if this is, I think Claire said this is nationally funded, but or public health funded, but I'm just kind of thinking, is this something that ultimately, if we have any challenges with funding, is it something we could take to the ICB? Because isn't this about outcomes and fits with integrated care? Just a thought. I don't know if David and Jean have got any thoughts about that.
Absolutely. Go on, Jean.
Yeah, absolutely, Krishni. And I think one of the key things that we need to make sure that we're clear on within the ICB is the 16 to 25-year-olds, do they fall under the children and young people, or do they fall under sort of the adult services? But I'm certainly happy to work with Claire and Lisa and JJ in terms of developing those outcomes for the university outcomes. I think if we've got that money extended until December next year, it just gives us a little bit of an opportunity over the next sort of 3 to 6 months to make sure this is built into some of the longer term plans for the ICB. But certainly I'm happy to pick that up with Claire outside the meeting. But you're right, Krishna, this is an absolutely invaluable service that we cannot lose.
And
Brilliant.
I'd add, it's a really good example of healthcare doing some early intervention, which is supporting people for the rest of their lives, and that benefits local authorities, communities, and way forward. So that's a perfect example of integrated care.
Exactly. Thank you. I mean, that's really powerful. All three of you, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I think it's shown us, you know, it's a very specific example of something that, you know, is really making a difference to people's lives. So you can see we're all you've you know made us all passionate about your service by just giving us that insight. So I think anything we can do now to champion it, we will, and you know, we can try and do that locally. But I think that evaluation sounds important, and getting that right over the next few months. But obviously, beyond that, once we've got that, I think making the case for the difference, the value this sort of service adds to people's lives and Jamal's lives and all the other you know, young adults that I know, Claire, you sounds like you're working with. So thank you so much. It's been lovely to meet you, Jamal, and thank you for taking time. All right.
Thanks for your comments as well. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Bye.
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 Brilliant. Well chosen example there, Jean, of a really good patient story, which I think has inspired us all to think about what the design of future services, I think, as well. It just goes to show that these quite, you know, specific, focused interventions can make a real difference. Thank you so much. Right, we move on then to our item 8 on risk. So we have paper D, which is our organisational risk register. Chris, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Krishni. So the ORR has followed its normal process that we've been through, that we go through regularly. In terms of picking out the key elements, 5 risks are above appetite. We've looked at the innovation risk, and ITO will bring in a highlight report to the next quality and safety meeting. We've also undertaken the initial alignment of the risks to the strategic objectives. We've reviewing the strike action and cost of living issues as identified in the paper, and also Richard's reviewing the finance risks. The Joint Committee's also agreed the focus on the deep dive, so we've sort of got to that position and we've been undertaking those. On the corporate risk register, which is one of the developments that we've introduced, we've got 21 risks recorded, 7 de-escalated from the ORR and 14 escalated. D1 is highlighted in that as the type of risk that's been de-escalated but will be continually reviewed, and if needed can then be escalated. So that illustrates the dynamic process of how we manage those within that development. In terms of the system risk work, we're focusing on the developing the common language and scoring, which is obviously critical. If we're not on the same page, we can't really work across the board. And if a risk has an interdependency with our risks, we'll be using the methodology we used when we did COVID of having a red box to highlight how those things link together. So that should give a clear transparency to that. We are then scheduled to review the risk appetite on the 6th of October. And really it's just for the board to receive the updated position and confirm satisfied. And then if anybody's got any specific questions for risk owners.
Thank you, Chris. So any comments or questions? No. Julia?
Thanks, Krishni. And thanks, Chris. Just to say, I think we've all said in each of the committees leading up to this, how this is great improved format. It's really much clearer. We can really see the embedding of the corporate risk register, etc. So it's just to endorse all the changes you're making and support you in that journey forward, because it's making it a lot easier to see the risks and understand what they're all about. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Gina. Yeah, and I think we're all in the conversation saying we're continuing to push for the dynamic risk register, which I think both NEDs and execs are really pulling together to make that happen. And I think that will be really good for CQC and for the trust anyway. Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. I mean, I think really important that this is a dynamic process, isn't it? Risk registers aren't pieces of paper, that they need to be things that help us and inform us and drive our focus, really. So really good developments. I think lots of nods, Chris. So I take that as support for the paper as presented. So I think we can say that we've received the updated position. Fiona? Did you want to come in?
I was just going to say, I think it is actually quite interesting that if we look back, 2.5 years, the progress that we've made on our risk reporting, it is incredible. I mean, such of this time 2 years ago, we were in such a different, I mean, it's obviously still a good level of risk reporting, but I just think that you can really document the journey of our increased maturity and approach to risk management. So I just thought it was probably worthwhile saying that. And a big thanks to Tina, who isn't here today because she's working on another paper, for her hard work behind the scenes on it all.
Thank you, Fiona. I think that's really important to recognise the work, and the focus this has received has been really good and helped us very much in refining our approach and our thinking, I think, which is important. Saqib?
I just wanted to briefly say I think it's it's very clear and concise, and also one of the things that with the various NHS organisations I've been working with over the last 7 years is to highlight things that are evolving, that are coming up in the future. And I think that's why Risk 12 is, it's particularly good to see that we're acknowledging future risks that, may develop. And I think, that forward gazing is always important on the risk register. Thank you.
Thank you, Saqib. Supportive comments about from colleagues in the chat about actually how well this has developed and the clarity of the reporting. So yes, please do pass on our thanks, Fiona, to Tina, and also obviously to collectively to your team for these developments. But I think we can say that the board is satisfied with the changes made to the trust risk profile, and really helpful to see that clarity. So thank you, Chris. We move on then to an oral update from Jean as our Chief Operating Officer on our COVID position and system-wide winter planning. Jean.
Thank you, Krishni. So from a COVID perspective, people will be aware that we are now in quite a low number, which is very positive. Yesterday we had 23 members of staff off with COVID-related symptoms, so it's still there, but it's not as prevalent as it was. But we've also only got 2 actions in the ICC, which is an amazing. I'm so happy about that. So from a COVID point of view, we're okay. I think we remain incredibly pressured from both mental health and physical health across the system. So, for example, for mental health today, we've got 15 patients awaiting admission, a further 24 requiring repatriation. So the demand is just excessive in terms of what we would normally work to. And massive thanks to Anne and her team for continually coping with that pressure as we move forward. We've also seen people who've heard on the media the pressure around ambulance handover delays, and of course the delayed discharges in terms of discharging individuals from hospital. It's very high across the country, it's very high in Northamptonshire, but we are working very much collectively as a system and have developed a winter plan, which we have all signed up to, which gives a really different approach. So we have got more beds in that than we would normally have, but there's also some other initiatives to improve Pathway 1, and people will be aware of the Pathway 2 initiative in terms of the reabling independence beds, which is progressing well. We are expecting the next 6 months to be very, very challenging. People, I'm sure the board and colleagues will know that we are expecting an increase in respiratory illness this winter, and that combined with the normal winter pressures and the fact that we hadn't actually had any letdown at all in terms of demand for urgent care means that our frontline staff will be under pressure, and it's something that we are discussing as an exec team in terms of how we're going to be able to support our staff over the next 6 months, because I can't see it stepping down in terms of activity. So we will of course let the board know what we determine that plan to be, and I'm hoping you'll see some comms coming out in terms of how we're going to listen to our staff to ensure that we support them both through winter, but also with the cost of living crisis that again we're all very much aware of. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. That was really helpful and good to get a sense of, progress with the initiative that you'd sought our support for in terms of that recovering independence. I think it was the reablement approach, which was obviously a really new initiative. Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Krishni. So I'm covering the seeing sort of firsthand really what Jean's describing in terms of pressure there. So I think as Jean described, it's going to be difficult over the winter period, and I think we're all going to have to kind of reflect on making sure we've got the focus and priority right on that. And as Jean said, we are supporting our staff. The cost of living group met again yesterday, and we've got paper coming to exec board on Monday. So I think there is a very clear requirement to have singular focus on operational pressures, I think probably over the next few months while we cope with all the things that Jean's talking about.
Thank you, Richard, and that just prompted me to just think that we need to recognise that the pressures, if the pressures are as nationally and locally anticipated to be significant, we do just need to think about whether from a governance and board committee perspective, are there things we need to do to support you as executive colleagues dealing with that. We've had some experience, I think, now as a board of moving to positions which hopefully kind of help you focus on operational pressures. So I do think we just need to be ready for that if we feel that's needed over this period. So I hopefully board colleagues will support us kind of taking stock of that over these next few months if the position is significantly challenged. But that is what we're anticipating. I think collectively that's the message we're getting, that we should be prepared. So agility may be needed in how we manage things, and I'm sure the team would be supportive of us reviewing our approach to sort of governance arrangements that we might want to review. Fiona, did you want to come back in, or is that a legacy hand as is now described?
I am very I must apologise. That is a legacy hand. I do apologise.
I think one of those new terms in the dictionary, along with "you're on mute," that has become now parlance, hasn't it, within common parlance? No problem. Thanks, Fiona. Thank you, Jean, for that update. Really helpful. Okay, so we move on then to the assurance report from the Joint Committee. This is our Joint Committee on Performance and Quality, and I think we moved it to, this is another small change we've made to the agenda. We moved it under risk, because under the risk section, because we felt really that the focus of the Joint Committee was increasingly on the risk agenda rather than anything else. So hence it's been positioned here. Now I just want to check whether, I think it's Scott who's coming in on this one. Scott?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'll pick up the baton from what you've just said there, Krishni, and just give, I mean, Chris touched on it when he was talking to the ORR a moment or two ago, but I just thought I'd just give a slightly longer hand articulation around what our focus is within the joint committee. So I think we've kind of resolved that where it's scheduled now, it comes just a week after the Quality and Safety Committee, and the same day, later in the same day than the Performance Committee, by which stage Q&S and Performance Committee have obviously fully reviewed the risks which are allocated to them as we go through. And as a consequence of that, we've decided that going forward, the Joint Committee should be less about a full risk register review again, and should be much more about the deep dive. So I just wanted to ensure that we had been clear about that. This time out, what we decided to look at, oh sorry, let me rewind just a second. We have previously looked in recent joint committees at some of our workforce challenges and risks associated with that. We've also looked at waiting list orientated challenges and risks. And we were actually intending this time out to do something similar, but what we felt was that actually Q&S had been looking at some of those activities just the week before. So as a consequence, we made a decision to actually shift our focus to look at a couple of the financial risks that are contained within the risk register. And I think we'd probably all agree that given the financial challenges that exist, not just to our organisation, but across the NHS, that was pertinent to do so. So we took the time to review two risks, B6, which is around the capital allocation that we have to our organisation being insufficient to meet our needs, and B8, which is a relatively new risk, only created in June, but that was about the failure to make use of our resources and get our productivity back up to pre-pandemic levels. So the session was quite active. Richard Wheeler led us through that, and I think actually at the end of that conversation, what we were able to conclude is that we were quite assured by some of the activities which were going on at present. I think we were doing all of the right things and had the right things in focus, but we benefited from the conversation in as much as that, particularly given in relation to B8, given it's a fairly newly created risk, what we had arrived at the conclusion was it just wasn't as specifically articulated as it could have been to fully represent all of the risk areas that were actually being covered by the risk. So it wasn't that we were missing something, it was the articulation of the way that the risk was being described. And I think that was a beneficial outcome from the session. I think the final thing that I would say is that sometimes you get to the end of these sessions and it's fairly obvious what the next focus point should be. But in this instance, given that we've recently been through a number of the key risks, what we decided to do was ask SEB to look at it again and make a recommendation back to the Joint Committee around where they think the focus area should be next time out. So I think that probably covers it, Kirsty. That was everything I wanted to take us through, but I'll pause there and see if there are any questions or clarifications people would like.
Great, thank you, Scott. That was very clear. Any questions or comments from colleagues? No, I think that's covered it really well, Scott. So I think we're just asked to receive the report and the sort of assurance that you've provided as, through the committee. I think it's a positive step to get that recommendation from SEB. So I think we can move forward on that basis. So thank you very much, Scott, for that. So that concludes our risk section, and we move on to the strategy section. So before I move into my report, is there anything Dave or executive directors want to bring to our attention more generally, that emerging things in environmental matters that anyone wants to bring to our attention in the public session? No, nothing particularly, Dave?
I'll cover most of it, I think, in my update, unless David wants to give an update just in terms of the
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so moving on to item, well, my chair's report, which is paper F. I'll take the report as read. Obviously, we recognise that obviously some of the circumstances over the last few weeks with the sad news of the passing of Her Majesty the Queen, obviously some changes were made to our governor meetings, and therefore you know, I've reported in the meeting what changes had to be adopted. I think particularly just wanted to highlight that I mentioned in the report that NED appraisals for 2021-20 due to be reported to NHS England by the 30th of September, and I can confirm that was completed on the 27th, so earlier this week. So that is something we've now concluded. In terms of succession planning and recruitment for NEDs, just really to note the sort of planned timeline for our recruitment to replace Maria, who will be stepping down from the board at the end of the year. But a very positive step, I can confirm. I think you've noted that Julia, following a panel interview, the governors agreed that she should be appointed to deputy chair. And I wanted also to confirm that Maria and Julia have agreed that Julia can take over from the 1st of October. So that's actually next week. So congratulations to Julia. I think that's a really good step because Maria's still around to support her and kind of guide her with anything. And it's a positive way of sort of handing over. So I'll just take this opportunity to thank Maria for being a very, very able and fantastic deputy chair, who I've sort of been very much able to rely upon, and really looking forward to Julia taking on the role as well. I know Julia is very excited about that. So thank you to the governors for supporting us with that appointment, because that was really, really helpful. And I just also want to take the opportunity to say that several governors, mainly due to capacity issues, decided to step down. So I just wanted to mention that and thank them for their contribution. We are currently going through a COG effectiveness review, which will sort of we will conclude and report back on. And that was discussed at the last COG meeting, which did take place. And just also to say that a particular highlight for me over the last couple of months was we had an event celebrating staff who'd achieved at least 25 years service. Julie Shepherd, our very own chief nurse, was one of those people. It was a lovely event. We had about 30 people present. We did all meet and put on a little buffet, and the staff involved actually had an opportunity to share some stories from the many years of experience they had with the NHS. And it was a really lovely event, and it was lovely to have it in person, because it's the first time we've been able to do it for, I think it's 2 years online. So really nice to be able to do it. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank, I mean, obviously not everyone was able to be there, but we have an awful lot of long-serving staff who are incredible. I mean, I always say, just to think about what they must have contributed to making a difference to our patients and service users over that time is just amazing. So just want to say thank you to everybody, and not just the people who were actually there at the event. So that's my report, and unless there are any questions, I'll hand over now to David. Dave?
Thanks, Krishni.
Sorry, Dave. Fiona?
I just wondered, Krishni, because we didn't manage to put it in your report because it hadn't been finalised at that stage, but we do have a new date for the annual members meeting.
Yes.
And that is the 17th of October at from 5 o'clock. So similar sort of timing as before. And we've got everything organised and prepared. You will have received a diary invite, but just for the minutes, I think it's important to record it, and also to say that, referring to your point about the recruitment of the new non-exec and an associate non-exec, we've actually highlighted on our microsite that meeting, so hopefully interested candidates can come along to our AMM as well. So I just thought it was important to just reference that.
Yeah, thank you, Fiona. Really important, because obviously this was one of the things we had to postpone, and so I'm really pleased that we've been able to reorganise that, and look forward to trying to sort of encourage attendance from members of the public and obviously our members as well. So I know all the plans were in place, and a lot of really good work was done by the team and our governors to get that to a state of readiness. So hopefully we will be able to put all those things back into place to go for the date. So just to remind us, Fiona, was it 17th? 17th of
That
October?
is correct. 17th of October. It's a Monday from 5 o'clock.
Great, thank you, Fiona. Good, we note that, and as I said, I think I'm sure the board would support the appointment of Julia and recognise the contribution of the governors. So on that note, hand over to Dave.
Thanks, Krishni. And just to echo, thanks to colleagues with the retirement event. I think someone was 46 years, which is an astonishing contribution. So just a few updates. You referenced the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. I attended. The Lord Lieutenant invited NHFT to send a representative to a service in Northampton, the Old Saints Church in Northampton on the 18th, which I attended on behalf of the Trust, just to update people. It was a lovely service, particularly touched by 6 faith groups said some words. I thought that was a really inclusive way of approaching the commemorative event, really, and said a lot really about her and the county itself, really. In terms of local and regional work, we had our quality review meeting with NHS England last week. General updates from that, a view that NHFT is probably the highest performing mental health trust in the region, which was nice to hear. A general focus for us, which we're aware of, on out of area placements and some work on health checks, which are on our plan. And I know, not surprises to us, we've got a grip on what we're doing in those areas. Quite a large push in terms of supporting elective recovery, both in region and outside of the region. So the 2 district general hospitals, the group, do some work on behalf to support University Hospitals Leicester. There was an ask they would do more of that, and indeed look to go beyond you know, a relationship with Leicester, but perhaps other trusts that are struggling. So just side people on that, as it does have an impact then on our overall profile of activity within the county. We also had an ICB development session that Krishni and I attended a couple of weeks ago, which was helpful. We got to a point where I think we've got the bones of what looks like a reasonable outcomes framework to guide our work over the next year, 18 months, focusing on some of the things that we're really worried about in NHFT, in particular CYP, which was helpful to have JJ's input, but some of those things are top on the list for the ICB more generally, and I think that will help us in our work, so that was positive. I also attended a Anchor Institution workshop yesterday, which Northampton Uni are hosting. I feel really excited by that. It had members from all the organisations across the county, the leaders, St Andrews, the Hospital Trust, public sector schools, and it was an inspiring conversation about there's almost £2 billion worth of public resource coming into the county. How can we work better to get better outcomes for that in terms of apprenticeships, procurement, social value, those kind of things. So it's just great to see that actually beginning to come together at a county level. Looking inwardly then, we've got a set of, the pay award has been announced and should now be in paychecks for colleagues this month, which hopefully will make a difference. As talked about earlier, the cost of living group continues to meet in a co-produced way with Trust Side, and we're meeting weekly as an exec team to focus on the areas that Jean referenced when she spoke about operational pressures. So what are the things that we need to absolutely keep a focus on over the next 3 to 6 months to support our teams. This month we've got Black History Month. There's a set of celebrations coming on stream, not this month, next month rather. Freedom to Speak Up Month also lands in October, which I know Melanie and myself and others are involved in bits and pieces relating to that. And we've got our Leadership Matters conference on authentic inclusivity on the 14th of October, which was really well received by colleagues. And then finally, we had the interview for the HSJ Trust of the Year earlier this week. I was joined by Adam Smith and Sharon Goddard, who's one of our service user carers. We think we did a good job. We'll find out in November, but it was nice to be nominated nonetheless, and it gives people a bit of a boost, I think, when they hear those things. Happy to take questions, Krishna, and everything else is in the report, really.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions or comments? No, nothing to clarify. I do. I think it's, you know, it's really important to say that actually being part of the shortlist for the HSJ Trust of the Year is an achievement in itself. So I think, you know, that's to be celebrated. Obviously, if we win, that would be amazing, and I would look forward to seeing the videos of our staff dancing around the HSJ trophy, which is the last time we won it. What happened at the Quality Awards that followed later, but that would be a nice thing to see again. But as I say, being in the shortlist is in itself an achievement. So well done to everybody who contributed to that. Okay, thank you, Dave. I don't think there's any questions. So good to have the update. And it sounds like there are some really good. I think you're right to say that it was great to see I mean, I wasn't able to be at that particular session, but I know there was a really good discussion about the outcomes framework for Northamptonshire, and I think that's a really important development because it will focus our attention on, you know, the outcomes that we all want to achieve together as a system, which is, I think, a fantastic step. Brilliant. Let's move on then to our new people section, where we've accommodated some key items that we wanted to cover off with the board. So obviously over to Chris on both of these. First of all, we have the people plan. And we then have action planning for RES and WDES. So over to you, Chris.
Thanks again, Krishna. Yes, I'm just presenting the people plan. This represents our future strategy, and under the people plan, and also aligns with our DIGBQ, our grow element of that. As has already been discussed by Scott and others are aware, it's a very challenging environment at the moment in terms of workforce, but we have been able to make some good progress on a range of issues that we've developed and taken forward. Some of the purpose of this is to update. We updated the board in May in terms of our progress, and the purpose of this is to highlight some of the work that's continued from them which we undertook to do, and then to highlight how we're looking to take things forward. Some of the key successes we've had have been the understanding racism courses and the Say No to Racist Patients. The cost of living group has been trailed, has again been about our response to the challenges that we're all experiencing, people seeing the press. We've also now had our Compassionate Leadership Conference, and we'll be developing our Compassion Compact out of that, which will focus on behaviours. And again, the Virtual Wellbeing Festival is a very key success that we have. The people plan goes on, our people plan goes on to describe what we're intending to do under the 4 key elements of the people plan. So in terms of looking after our people, belonging in the NHS, growing the future, new ways of working. I'm not planning to go through all of those in detail because people will have them, and I'm happy to talk through any questions people have got, but I think they do set out a really ambitious plan for the future in terms of what we're looking to achieve for our people. I think an important element I wanted to highlight is, again, we've talked a lot about the workforce challenges and how we take these forward, and we have been very successful. We again have had HSJ awards and Healthcare People Management Awards around all the work we've done, but we have done this through particular initiatives. People have been involved in those. For example, the Wellbeing Group, which Melanie is involved in, is a separate group, but we have had significant successes. But I think as things have developed, there needs, in my mind, and I think others have suggested this, to be more of a coalesced, coherent approach where things are brought together. And we have been working with a kind of a pilot of execs coming together and representatives across the organisation to look at workforce initiatives in a group. I think it would be a good idea to create a formal level 2 committee, which would call the Strategic Workforce Group, and then I think start to think how that can report into the level 1 committees. So that would act as a really good way for us to monitor this people plan, which will be developed into an action plan, and I think that can work really well. I think in my discussions with colleagues, and picking up on Scott's point, it may be, and we will need to decide which level 1 committee would report into, but there may be a case for it to go into the joint committee. The reason I say that is I think workforce has been our major risk probably for 2 or 3 years, and it's only got more and more challenging. And if we take the line that Scott's talked about, we've already done a lot of deep dives into that joint committee, and because workforce channels across the two, some trusts have got a workforce committee. So that's an idea that might be worth us exploring. And I know we've got a board development workshop, so that might be a useful thought that I think probably does hook up a lot of ideas, thoughts and suggestions people have put forward. But I'd commend the plan to the board, and look for their support with any amendments or questions people want to raise or make in the meeting.
Thank you, Chris. So any broader questions first and foremost around the strategy and you know, the feedback on the content of that people would want to raise at this stage? Don't feel you need to. I mean, I'm sure Chris would welcome any comments that people want to make outside of the meeting anyway, but if there's anything really kind of significant that people would like to comment on in the meeting, I think that would be fine. Richard?
Just a comment really, Krishni. I'm conscious that the NHS staff survey is out at the moment, so we're obviously very keen, and we're doing work, as Chris is leading that work in terms of promoting people responding so that we're getting that feedback. So I think that's just timely to cover that.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Important point to note. Saqib?
I just wanted to comment on the financial well-being that's under the our ambition 22-23. I think that was really critical, but I just wanted to see whether we have an understanding of how many people use the EAP, because I think the EAP also offers financial support. So whether we had any any idea of how many people are using that service, because I think that in conjunction would be really powerful to show that we do care about our staff at the current time.
That's a good point, Saqib. I haven't personally got the figures at the moment, but we could take that away, certainly.
Great, thank you, Chris. Thanks, Saqib, for the point. Melanie?
Hi, Chris. Yes, thank you. Couple of things really. One is just an observation, which I know is really almost irresistible to, when you're talking about achievements, list just as much as you possibly can, because there are so many of them. And I think just a general reflection, if I may, in engaging with our board materials, and I guess we saw it a little bit in the workshop as well with the CQC. I think sometimes less can be more, and maybe put the whole list in an appendix and just really do a little bit of showcasing of a fewer number in the main body of the report, which might make it a little bit more able to celebrate some really good things. But that's just an observation on the content. I guess my question, Chris, and I'll probably maybe come back to this later in the board meeting, is I see our retention rates dropping, and I see our turnover rates increasing steadily, and I see our number of leavers increasing steadily in both the workforce safeguarding and in the integrated performance dashboard. And consistently sort of numbers going up, and our turnover is outside of the our sort of desired target area. I wonder if there's enough reflection in these 4 areas of our people plan response to look at retention, stay conversations, the learning from people leaving, and sort of that cycle of feedback back into the plan. Because I don't think there's anything that I spotted in the plan that specifically talks about retention, and forgive me, I may have missed it, but I just wonder whether maybe given the continuing pressures and the way the pressure on staff, and we know that you know, across the NHS there are more people leaving the service. So I just wonder whether it might be worth reflecting on whether we've got that really well covered.
Yes, I'll take that away, but we have got that prioritised within the work we're doing at the moment. We have established recently a retention group. I may as well raise it here. I was going to raise it under the integrated reporting and say that in terms of the board, yes, we have seen the turnover rise. This is a challenge across the system. We're actually undertaking a really deep dive into that as an exec team, and in fact are looking to come back to probably the performance committee with more of feedback. I mean, you've to some extent stolen my thunder, Melanie, but that's,
sorry, Chris,
that's
so
fine.
sorry.
No, it's good. I mean, it's good to know that's been picked up. But yeah, absolutely, that is a concern we've got, and we need to really understand the depth of why people are leaving, and equally, you know, what that's about. Is it about flexibility? Is it about, some of it is about cost of living. One of the things that's very, very concerning for Northampton is the huge proliferation of warehouses, and for our kind of healthcare assistant rates, the rates in the warehouses are above that. They're some are 12, some are £14 an hour, and they're putting on buses from villages to take people. So the kind of the local labour market challenges kind of ramped up even in the last 6 months again. So no, all those points you've made, I think we have certainly talked about it without going through all the detail, but certainly I think we have and will have plans on that. I think, yes, we have put a lot of stuff in, but I think that's probably a hangover from our first plan where we did put a lot of detail in, which I think you commented on then as well. I think the plan for the future is got more kind of key targeted areas rather than the longer list we did in the first plan. So hopefully we can demonstrate we're learning with some of your prompting, no doubt.
It is brilliant to be able to list so many achievements, and I don't think we should lose that. I think we need that list somewhere, but I'd also like to get a little bit more insight into a smaller number of them, you know, just to celebrate, you know, just the first three, if you like.
Yeah, and the priorities are key, aren't they? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Melanie. I mean, if it's probably worth, just as we're talking about retention, I know, Chris, you were going to come on to this later, but I chaired the Regional People Board, which actually Chris attended, I think, was it last week? And retention was actually, there was a deep dive on retention because this is a national issue, it's a regional issue, and unfortunately there's no magic bullet. I mean, the analysis that from the region was, you know, it's a range of things. I think the one thing that we need to do, I mean, obviously there are differences in different workforces and different skill groups, etc. But you know, there was a bit of I think one of the things that the region agreed was actually having almost a sort of like system retention leads was one thing that I think was going to receive some focus, but also looking at, you know, urgent sharing of good practice through some kind of event that was just literally going to focus on retention. So just to give you a sense that this is going, you know, these conversations going on at kind of quite significant levels throughout the NHS, because I think everybody's seen some changes in retention rates recently. Scott, and then you did.
Yeah, thank you, Krishni. I just wanted to again just enhance some of the comment that Chris was making in relation to his thoughts around a level 2 committee on workforce. We've had some discussion around that in recent times, not just for workforce, but for other potential level 2 committees. And I just wanted to give a bit of context for those on the call and perhaps some of our guests that are listening in as well in the meeting. We got some of this detail from our effectiveness reviews of the actual committees themselves, which I have to say were actually across the board very strong in terms of, you know, the success and effectiveness of each of the respective committees. But I think we need to continually look at and respond to the changing environment that we're participating in and that we represent. And as a consequence of that, we're looking at, you know, I've had some discussion and we've had presentation from David Williams at the last performance committee talking about a collaboration and commissioning committee. to represent our work in the CAMS activity and across various other aspects of our collaborative working. I've had some early discussion with Paul in relation to perhaps the reinvigoration of the Estates Committee as a level 2 activity, and we've heard from Chris here about workforce as well. So I just thought it was important to try and draw through some further context and support of what Chris was saying, because I think we're moving into making these considerations from a position of strength, but I think it's absolutely appropriate that we should do so in order to make sure that we just keep our finger on the pulse as we go forward and make sure that we're appropriately responding to all the challenges that we have.
Thank you, Scott. Helpful sort of broader comment about some of the developments that of which this is a part, which I think is good context. Judith.
Thanks, Brittany. Thanks, Chris, for the report. I mean, my comment was really around the proposed change in governance and oversight arrangements, whereas I totally understand that workforce is such a major issue and continues to be a real concern, and it is one of our risks that we're outside of appetite. But I'm very happy to take this offline, but just wanted to understand slightly more deeply as to the proposed structure, and whether it's not actually just going to take away executive time from the BAU, the business as usual, and the stress on their time, and what, in direct support of that, what benefit it's going to have. So slightly more sort of understanding on that would be really great. But as I said, happy to take this offline if this is not the correct forum.
Chris, do you want to comment on that? I mean, I think this was part of the committee effectiveness review, and actually an ask from colleagues to try and have a more coherent view around workforce as a key risk. So I don't think it's kind of going to add anything. It's actually to add a burden, as I understand it, but more to fine tune what we're already doing. Chris, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I think we are involved in groups anyway, so I don't think I mean, it will add. Yeah, it will add, because we will need more governance. But then I think, given let's say, the line of sight Christian is talking about, and then the clarity that can help give us and the focus, I think it will be a good step. And as we say, we can amalgamate other pieces of work we're currently doing. So in that sense, it should support us with the BAU, not add to it.
But I think important to keep that under review, and also worth mentioning, I think this has already been modelled within our group structure at Leicester Partnership, has it not? So they've got a strategic workforce group, as I understand it, Chris.
Yeah, LPT have got that, although they are looking at where that reports to. I think the other thing we need to think about as our biggest risk, and how we look at it, how we demonstrate the governance and the scrutiny and the assurance from it is going to be important as well. So I think that debate about where it might go, and as I said, my thought might be to the Joint Committee, because it's our biggest risk, has been our biggest risk. I can't see how it's not going to be for the next 3 years or so. So that may add more from non-execs input into it as well. I think that all helps with better solutions, really.
Thanks, Chris. So I think the proposal, well, let's get Richard. Maria, did you want to come in? I'm just conscious that no. Okay, Richard, and then we'll conclude.
I think it was Judith before me, was it?
I've already taken Judith's comment,
sorry.
I think.
Sorry, my confusion. I wanted to just remind the board that we are an accredited real living wage employer, and the Living Wage Foundation brought forward their announcement to last week. And so that will form part of the consideration that we have as an exec team next week. Links really to Melanie's point around retention and Chris's comment around the challenges around recruiting and people.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. It's a really important point. Trudy, did you want to come in? I know you commented, but it was just really about understanding what the workforce of the future wants from us, which I think is a really good point. Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I
Trudy?
just wanted to make that point, really. I think there's a huge piece in terms of education with managers, because the younger generation aren't looking for the traditional roles that we've got on offer. So we need to do some work with them to understand actually what people are looking for out of jobs now. which might not be what they were looking for out of jobs when they started. So I think it's a whole education piece that we need to get up to speed on.
Yeah, thanks, Trudy. And I think that speaks to the sort of broader point that perhaps I just wanted to make, which I think we just it's not to say I think it's part of the people plan and the people strategy, but we can't just keep trying to recruit more people. We need to think about what the future workforce might actually need to look like, because and it's a conversation that actually took place at the Regional People Board. There is something about more people doing things differently in the original wording of the people plan, more people doing things differently in a compassionate and inclusive environment. And I like the more people doing things differently, because I'm not sure that we can just keep recruiting exactly the same way as we've always done. We'll just need to think about technology and all the other things that might enable us to do things differently, which I think David mentions as well, and partnerships, how that helps us, different types of interventions and services that might deliver better outcomes. So all these things I think are part of it. And it's an important part of our consideration for the future, and working as a system obviously is significant within that. So Chris, is there anything else you want to add to this item before we conclude it and move on?
No, just welcome people's comments. I think Trudy's point, we have discussed that at some length in the HR team, and the exec team have undertaken to do a kind of a workshop themselves. It's understanding the workforce and what its expectations are is a huge issue. I mean, at the just to land at the HPMA conference, they asked a question to all the HRDs, who, probably, not being rude, but probably most of them were at least over 40, and they said, what is the number 2 item for Generation Z, the most important thing to them? And people didn't particularly know, but interestingly, it was the green agenda, the second most important thing that they look for in work. And I just don't think, as you're challenging, Krishni, I don't think that's where we come from at the moment in terms of thinking, what do we need to offer and what do we need to do? So looking at that point, and as I say, something we've been discussing, Trudy's challenge in the chat, I just think that's going to be key to what we do. And then that will play into retaining them.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Chris. And interesting, I think we're seeing that difference in, for example, in GPs. I think I saw some data which showed that in primary care, more and more GPs are working part-time. And actually, therefore, you actually need to then train more, because the choices they're making in terms of work-life balance are very different. So I think the future challenge is something we just need to keep our eye on, isn't it? And it's something I know that we're all talking about, but it's sort of that mixture of dealing with the here and now and looking ahead to what the future might create for us. But I think you've got some helpful feedback. So perhaps probably the most significant one is just making sure we've got an adequate focus on retention. I think Saki's comment earlier about sort of understanding more about financial well-being as well, and the different workforce of the future. Those are probably the key themes I think perhaps people have fed back on, just in terms of but broad support. I think, Chris, both recognition of the achievements and also support for the direction of travel. I think probably worth saying then, just on the governance point, the exec were keen, I think, to introduce this strategic workforce group to bring the people agenda together to one place and have a single reporting point. I know it's something I've discussed with certainly Melanie and other colleagues who've been actively involved in some of the people wellbeing agenda, for example, and there was support for that. So I think we try this, but obviously, as with all of these committee and other sort of effectiveness developments, we've got to keep them under review to make sure they're adding value and not adding a burden, which I think is Judith's point, really. So hopefully, is that satisfactory for everyone in terms of summarising where I think we've got to, and we'll leave you to take that forward, Chris.
Thank you, Krishni.
Excellent. Right, back to you then on the Res and Des.
Yeah, thank you again. Yeah, we brought as people will be aware, we brought the information on the WDES and the Res to the board previously, and we highlighted in there that we have seen some significant improvements. We've still got a number of challenges. The scores that we have still aren't ones I think we can be comfortable with, but good to see that the things we are doing are improving. In line with our approach to work closely with our networks, we have undertaken co-production events with both the REACH network and the Disability and Long-Term Conditions network, which involved a range of execs. What we've set out for you here, and I'll take it as read and just highlight a few points, is the kind of the big themes. We will be obviously turning this again into a detailed plan that we'll take forward and work with colleagues from the networks on. I think number one, the joint, if I pick the joint pieces first, we've worked for a long time on the inclusive recruitment ambassadors. The training and the implementation of that now is imminent, so that's important for us to do because we still see the challenges around recruitment, even though those scores have improved and we have recruited a lot of for example, BAME staff across the grades which match the national expectations. Developing our inclusive leaders network out of the understanding racism. Due to resources, it's been hard for us to set the learning sets in place to take that forward and to set that network. But I think that's an important step in getting people more involved in how we take things forward. On the race equality, addressing racism for patients has been critical. We've delivered that in our adult mental health wards, and we are looking to roll that out to other areas now. 0 to 19 we're doing work with, and the older adults, and again building our understanding racism to actually spread that so our cultural piece develops. We highlighted in the report to the board that we did have a challenge around the disciplinaries. We've got a smaller number, but that was a figure that was concerning. So we're instituting changes there with the decision-making group to test when those cases come through, that we can review them. On the WDES, the disability workforce standard, one of the big ones will be for the exec to get involved in a reverse mentoring. That was a key shift and driver for the work we did on race, that we involved execs and other senior managers in reverse mentoring. We haven't as yet done that with the disability network, and that's going to be a really important one, and also making sure that they feel safe within that, because that's been a key challenge for us. So I again commend the initiatives to the board for support, and then we will take those away to do the detailed planning to make the actions move forward. Thanks, Chris. Judith?
Thanks, Krishni, and thanks for the report, Chris. It's more of an observation, really. It's always really heartening to see statistics and our reported statistics move in a positive way in relation to Res and Des. But what really keeps me going is all the additional work that is being done, that is going beyond the data. So the reverse mentoring specifically, and all the work that is being proposed to be done and currently being done in relation to recruitment, I think that is so important, because eventually that's what's going to move the data for us in a positive way. So thanks for that, Chris.
Thank you, Judith. Any other comments from people? Chris, a couple of things from me. One was in terms of inclusive recruitment ambassadors, are we going to use them in some form for all our recruitment, not, including senior recruitment, sort of executive board recruitment?
Yeah, it is for band 7 and above, Krishni. So the development ones, that will be the first step. I think if we can get this to work, because there's no point making the commitment and not, you don't want to make the commitment and not deliver, because that's almost worse, I think. That's the first challenge. But then absolutely how we spread that is a key element of, we've moved a lot of things in this area from where they were. But all of them are about making that step and then moving it forward. So absolutely.
Yeah, and just the other thing, I mean, really pleased to see sort of a further step on the disciplinary process, because you're right. I mean, it was the one we were concerned about, weren't we? Albeit small numbers. We could see that the data was showing it was one of the things that we were moving the wrong way on, when we'd actually made quite significant progress with the introduction of the cultural ambassadors. Just an additional question related to that. I don't know what our data is like, because again, these are very small numbers, but I know that the GMC and probably the NMC, but the GMC certainly reports that there's a disproportionate rate of referrals to the GMC for doctors and dentists of BAME heritage. It's a significant disparity. Are we able to introduce anything with it, that we're trying within our disciplinary process to those referral processes as well? I mean, is there a way that we can try and influence that?
Yes, because that decision-making group would normally, so referral to the GMC and the NMC comes through the disciplinary process anyway. So that assessment can also take on board that issue.
Great. Because I certainly talking to the GMC, because we invited them to the Regional People Board to talk about the issue, it was felt very much like, the need for organisations to look at that early intervention type approach that we're talking about, to see whether there's a way of making sure that people don't just feed into the referral process. Albeit, the referrals themselves might ultimately be appropriate. So no, that's helpful. Thank you. Maria?
Thanks, Krishni. It was just a question for Chris around the addressing racism for patients work and the pilot that's been underway and being rolled out. Just interested in whether whether it be quality or performance committee get to have a bit more learning from that, to understand in a bit more detail how that's gone and how that's progressing.
Yeah, we can certainly do that, Maria, and I think that's part of the point we were discussing earlier, isn't it? We do these initiatives, we report them, but we probably do need a bit more rigor about how we get that feedback and assessment of the impact. That would be a move on. I think we're in a good place, as Scott said, but it's how do we move that on to get more feedback on it. But yes, I can definitely pick that up. I know David Ledger, who's led it, has worked with people who've worked with the teams that have done it and got some feedback, so it can. And as we say, we're moving that on, so we can come back with a report on that.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Maria. Jean?
Yeah, just to say that we are doing bringing in some of that work, Maria, into the staff safety and security group. So that will feed up through quality and safety, which I think will be a really good place for it to land. And if you don't mind, Chair, I would just like to mention Amelia Chittenhey, who's one of our amazing nurses who recently, last week in fact, graduated from the Developing Aspirant Leaders Programme, which is a Midlands programme, which is fantastic. And I had the privilege of sponsoring her through that. And also really pleased to say that Simba Kapish, who people might remember from the Crisis House, the manager of the Crisis House, has also been successful and will start that programme this month as well, and I'm next month, and I'm also very privileged to sponsor her. So just really nice news I wanted to share with the board.
Thank you, Jean. I think the photo of you speaking at the celebratory event was circulating on social media, and I know Diana kind of commented about the importance of your support for Amelia as well, and it is fantastic. I think it's a really inspirational programme, and actually the Midlands region has driven that, and I had the privilege of speaking to that group and spending 3 hours in their company talking about board leadership. So I sort of a little personal element of pride that Amelia was part of that group, but also that there was a really good group of people that we were supporting, and cohort 2, as Gina said, is just about to start. So really positive development. So thank you, Jean, and congratulations to Amelia, who actually I think also shadowed you to the board and observed the board not that long ago. So brilliant work. Julia?
Thanks, Krishni. Yeah, thank you, Jean. That's brilliant. I met Simba after the last patient story at board at one of the crisis houses, and inspirational lady. So yeah, many congratulations to her. It's just a quick question. I was listening to an interview with a person with a neurodiverse condition the other day, talking about recruitment and how he felt that there was no way he was going to get a conventional job because the recruitment interview processes just were not geared to his responses and how he thought at all. And I just wondered whether it's just some assurance really that a lot of the initiatives are being co-produced with relevant people and people with lived experience. It just got me, it's quite thought-provoking, just to make sure that we're, actually speaking to the right people to make sure that our processes are what people need in order for us to get, as Trudy says, different people into the workplace, etc.
Yeah, we do. I mean, as we said, the plan was co-produced with the networks, and
yeah.
The EDI team work closely with people representing, all those areas where that support or tailoring is needed, or that we need to, I suppose maybe we need to expand what we do. So yes, I can assure you that is an approach we are taking.
Thank you, Julia. Julie, final comment?
I'd like to come in on that, Julia, and just give you a bit of assurance. So as you know, I've got dyslexic tendencies, and I was involved with a group of staff across the trust working with HR on recruitment in dyslexia. So I can give you first-hand experience of that.
Thank you, Julie. Julie, just to mention, you're quite quiet in the mix. I don't know whether that's just for me. So if I don't know if you're presenting any items coming up, but you might find that your volume needs to go up, but just in case. Okay, thank you very much, Chris. I think you wanted us to actually support these actions, didn't you, and approve them for going forward. As you highlighted in the paper, it very much the actions co-produced with the relevant networks, and I think that's a really important step in the way that we go forward. So very happy to support that, and we look forward to getting some feedback about progress and seeing obviously changes in our data over the period in terms of improvements. Thank you very much, Chris. I'm going to bring the items to this particular section then to a close and suggest we take a short break till 11:20, and then we can start on the quality section of our agenda, which I think with Julia, followed by Linda, who's going to be leading a number of the items on that section. So look forward to seeing you in about at 20 past. Thanks very much, everyone. Right, I'll make it 20 past. So we'll make a start on the quality section of the agenda. So it's over to Julia first for the assurance report from Quality and Safety. Or actually, you did, because I think you did actually chaired the meeting. So over to you, Judith.
Thanks, Krishna. Yes, I did have the privilege to chair the Quality and Safety Committee in August. And as ever, we had a very rich discussion around all the topics on the agenda. The few areas that I would like to highlight to the board this morning is the two Amber Assurance key issues are monitoring, workforce safeguards and quality surveillance report. These have been on Amber for a while, not because we're not assured, but because, as we've already discussed, workforce continues to be such high concern and high risk to the trust, and in relation to the quality surveillance report, because there is a continued stickiness on the compliance on the mandatory training, and there was discussion in the committee this time also as to produce comparative data so that the committee can see the progress in relation to the data and try to work out what works and what doesn't in relation to ensuring that we become compliant again in relation to that. In addition, we had an update for under the quality and regulatory update, a discussion around the CQC findings at HMP Onley, and there was a very detailed and rich discussion as to how that Crystal programme links in with the self-assessment and will help to flush out any future areas of concern, which was very positive from a from the point of view of the committee. We also discussed the risk register and cost of living crisis, as well as subcommittee effectiveness that Julia picked up on her return. And the final areas really is what we discussed in relation to future deep dives and a more deeper discussion were two areas. The first one was freedom to speak up, which we need to do a deep dive on that, and we also agreed to move that higher up in the agenda to ensure that we all have full focus on it. And also research and innovation, where we are in fact doing a lot, but the committee needs to and would like to hear more of it. And Itai said that he'll be dealing with that shortly. So that's my summary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judith. Excellent. So really helpful and clear. Any questions for Judith or members of the committee? Okay, so building on that, I think we have got some of our standard reports on quality following. And today, Linda, I believe, is leading on all of those. So I'll hand over to you, Linda. If we can ask you sort of to highlight, take the reports as read, but highlight anything obviously key that you want to bring to our attention. And we'll pause for questions in between the various items. So over to you, Linda.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you. Good morning, colleagues. The first report that I'm presenting is the Patient Safety and Learning Assurance Report. So I'll take it that the report has been read, and just to highlight a few key points within the report. So the first is around the top 3 themes with regards to our patient safety incidents, and these include pressure ulcers, self-harm, medication incidents, falls, violence and aggression. So with regards to pressure ulcers, you'll note that there has been an increase in pressure ulcers. However, a lot of this is due to supporting the staff with the reporting. So this is one of the areas. Most of our pressure ulcers are in community nursing, and one of the challenges we've had in that team is around staffing and the resource around it. So you'll find, unfortunately, when you do rely on regular staff, some of the reporting may not be up to the standard that we expect. But with the input and support of the tissue viability nurses and the safeguarding team, the reporting has increased, and obviously the audit around those incidents is supporting the teams to learn, and a lot more proactive and preventative measures are going in. With regards to violence and aggression, the reporting is looking at violence and aggression towards patients, towards property, and also towards staff. The wider piece around violence towards staff is picked up and looked at in further detail through the safety group that Jean alluded to earlier. With regards to falls, some ongoing work around that, because whilst we recognize that our falls are not significant and not widely different from what we had previously, it is one of the areas that we can be more proactive and learn with regards to those areas. From the previous board, there had been mention around serious incidents that had not been allocated, and I'm pleased to report to board today that with the support of the chief nurse, our outstanding investigations have now been allocated. So we are in a far much better position, as shown on the table within the report. This is something that will continue to be monitored and looked into, as we do not want to slip into a situation where we have as many unallocated reports as we previously had. Going forward, I just wanted to mention that we've got the ongoing thematic reviews that are included within the report, and some early learning has already been identified through these thematic reviews. Also wanted to highlight with regards to our learning of lessons and our duty of candor. This is very key for us as a trust and as an organization. So I'm pleased to confirm that whilst we did have delays in commencing our investigations, actually the duty of candor has been completed, and those users of services, their families, will have already had contact, and most of that will be through the family liaison officers that we have within the team. Within the report, I've also mentioned highlighted the role of the new group director of patient safety who will be working across NHFT and LPT. This is James Mullins, who was previously the Assistant Director of Patient Safety. So we're pleased with this new role because, again, it has a clear focus on patient safety as well as shared learning with elements of quality improvement, working with the chief nurses from both the trusts. We included information as well around the new patient safety incident response framework. This is due to be implemented next year, and there's ongoing work around us being ready to implement that. There'll be further information shared with Trust Board members at the development session that is planned for the 6th of October, but some information has been included in the report for you to review. Those are the main highlights for me to give within this report. I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you very much, Linda. First comment or question from Julia?
Thanks, Linda, for a really comprehensive overview. Just a couple of bits of additional assurance I can give to the board. I sit on the safety committee who have the opportunity to look at all this in great detail, and a couple of areas that were really, really robust assurance. One was around the delay in investigations, as Linda said, but we took the opportunity to have a look and be assured about the immediate actions that are taken for some of those incidents. Just because the investigations may be delayed, the initial actions were all taken, to ensure patient safety or staff safety, etc. So that was really good to hear. Absolutely commend the whole organisation on 5 thematic reviews. That is a lot of reviews, and that stems from a real genuine desire to learn and improve. So I just wanted to comment on that. And then lastly, the medical devices issue. So this was certainly brought to Quality and Safety Committee's attention a few months ago, and we have a new medical devices lead, Deborah Allen. I wanted to just give her a shout out, really. We had the most detailed, thorough assessment, warts and all, of the issues that have been around, excuse me, for a little while, around having a robust system for all of our medical devices, knowing that they're all serviced appropriately and that staff have got the right equipment and they're trained on them. And the systems that she's put in place and is supporting the operational teams with sounds really sensible, pragmatic, and it feels as though we're on a much better journey around medical devices. And I know we'll receive regular updates at Patient Safety and Quality Forum around the progress with medical devices. So just wanted to commend the level of assurance that we're now getting. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia. Really helpful. Julie?
I've just got a couple of bits to add, but thank you, Linda, for a very concise report. Around the allocation of investigations, that's up to the 1st of September. The other thing is around PSURF, just to say we are working as a system, we're not working in isolation, but working as not only in this system, but with James's post, we're able to have learning from LPT as well, because he's working in the system with LPT. So there's one of the benefits that's coming out of James's post in relation to PSURF, and I just thought that was worth adding.
Thank you, Julie. So I can't see any other comments. I think, really helpful, clear report, and actually Julia in her supportive follow-up comment actually answered one of my questions about what action we're taking just to make sure when we haven't been able to allocate an investigation, what action we're taking to make sure there's no harm whilst we're waiting for that investigation to start. So so that's really helpful. And a shout out to Debbie, I think it was noted, and always good to hear about sort of initiatives that we're taking forward to address issues we've recognised, which is what is the important thing, is what we're doing to address any learning or actions that are required. So thank you. So the board is asked to note really the assurance provided, particularly in, obviously there's a level of detail in there which is really helpful, and obviously on the performance of the SI reporting process that we have and duty of candour, etc. So it's really just agreeing that we are assured on the basis of the the document that's provided. So I think colleagues are happy to support that, and I think there is clarity about areas that are obviously outstanding for us to address. So thank you very much, Linda. We move on then to the complaints report, paper L.
Thank you very much, Krishni. So the Complaints, PALS, GP Concerns, Compliments and I1 Great Care report is one of the reports I'm really pleased to be presenting, because feedback from those who use our services is really key to us ensuring that we are delivering high quality services. So one of the things I wanted to highlight is that the Complaints Review Committee has resumed their meetings from July of this year. So that gives more focus into the detail of the complaints coming through, PALS concerns, as well as the compliments we receive and what we're doing with the feedback from I1 Great Care. Another area to highlight is that within the Complaints PALS team, we are considering introducing apprentice roles. This will be key so that we can develop, grow our own, and we've seen the success of apprentices within other areas in the trust. So that is something that we're looking at doing. There's been increased activity within the team, and when we talk of increased activity, we're not talking of increased complaints or contacts. We're actually talking of complaints that then get reopened. We're also talking about complaints where there's a lot of information that needs to be collected from various sources. So that's been quite a stretch for the team. And part of this is to ensure that there's enough resource within the team for us to be able to respond to complaints, to PALS concerns, because we appreciate if we can't respond timely to PALS concerns, they are more likely to escalate to complaints. So it's really key that we have enough resource within the team, and having apprentice roles that can support with some of the low-level administrative tasks will free up a lot of the capacity for the PALS officers as well as those who are dealing with the complaints. Within the paper, we've put down the complaints 25-day completion target trajectory. So if board members will recall, last year, due to the pandemic response, we had moved to 45 days to respond to our complaints. As I've already mentioned, the pressures within the team as well as within operational services, it's not possible for us to return to that to 25 days immediately. So we are proposing this trajectory, which we will work through so that by next year, beginning of April, we would have gone back to 25 days. I'd also like to highlight that there are some complaints that we're still able to respond to within the 25-day framework, but actually us working through with a trajectory that will ensure that we are responding to our complaints as per the timescales we have set. Otherwise, if we move back to 25 days, then we'll be looking at a situation where we're not likely to meet that target for all our complaints. What is positive for the team, the organization, is that for all complaints received, we are acknowledging and responding to those complainants so that they know that we've received their complaints within the required timescale. So most of those are responded to within the working day or the next working day. And if it's due to a weekend, immediately after that. So that's been positive. What we also note with the complaints that come through for our operational colleagues, the immediate issue once a complaint comes through is the welfare, well-being of the complainant. So that is always prioritized. So whilst the complaint response may take longer to come through, but actually the well-being, the safety of the patient remains paramount. And that's what the operational teams continue to prioritize whilst we respond to the complaints. Within the report, we've also detailed the issues around the complaints where we have requested extensions, and a lot of the extensions requested are due to compiling information where the investigators have been trying to get further information from staff. And unfortunately, we've had episodes of sickness absence, and that will affect the complaint being responded to within the timescale. So we've had to then request extensions. One of the things that we've also noted within the team, so across complaints team and patient safety, is that for some of our operational colleagues, they will be supporting investigations for serious incidents. So when complaints also come through, we're expecting the same people to be involved. So that's got a knock-on effect. And we're now looking at how we support our operational colleagues with an ask for more colleagues from the corporate directorate to then support with some of those investigations, which is what has been happening recently. Something else that we've included in the report, which we hope you'll find useful, is an analysis of our contacts as an organization versus the complaints pals activity. So this is us just being more transparent in showing the amount of contacts that we have. So whilst we do not want to see an increase with complaints, it cannot be negated that actually the services are providing really good services, because there's so many contacts that we receive, and unfortunately we will see complaints come through. So we felt that this may be useful information for the board. Then the last bit that I'll end off with is on our I Want Great Care. So the contract that we have currently expires in October, and a 6-month extension was afforded to this contract, which gives us enough time to co-produce a new tender specification stating what it is that we want out of whatever design we come up with that will meet our needs for now and the future, as well as represent a good value for money. So that's another ongoing piece of work that we're doing currently. And then we've also included the main themes that are coming out of our I Want Great Care feedback. And these are communicated immediately to the services, to the different teams. And a lot of what you'll see now has already been picked up, and the teams are very much aware of those and working through those areas that are highlighted within the feedback. I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Melanie.
Thank you, Linda. Very comprehensive report and update. My question was very specific, really, to the I Want Great Care new tender specification and process for that kind of service. Is that something that we're doing in isolation, or are we driving to be coterminous with Leicester, or indeed the East Midlands Alliance or Northamptonshire? This must be a cross-trust requirement. So I just wondered how we were collaborating on that.
Yeah, so with regards to the work that's going on, we are looking at what's happening around us, and certainly we benefit from our group arrangement with LPT. So we've already scoped out what they are using and what we are using as a trust. We've also looked at our role within the integrated care system and how we can utilize that. So we're not doing this in isolation as such. We are considering what is actually happening around us and those opportunities to then be able to use our feedback wider within the system.
Thanks, Linda.
I'll let Julie come in if she's got more to add.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think more generally, I don't think I Want Great Care is utilised extensively across the NHS. And I think that's a challenge. I mean, interestingly, having had the value or seen the value of I Want Great Care for us, I did actually share some information about it with the National Director for Improvement NHS at NHS England, because I think a consistent approach across the NHS would be a far better solution and might actually give us all a far more cost-effective approach. But I sort of support the principle, Melanie. I'm just not quite sure whether actually we're collectively as enabled as we would ideally like for the NHS to use this, a consistent approach across the NHS. But I think these are the sorts of things that perhaps, you know, nationally will become more of a focus going forward.
And I think it's just, I was looking for assurance that, you know, that our sort of thinking was more broad, and that, for example, if we think there might be the development of a more national approach, then we wouldn't want to tie ourselves into a really long-term contract. So it's just, again, just exploring assurance around how we're approaching it. But thank you, Linda. Thank you for the response. And I can see that Julie has now stepped forward, put her hand up, and is willing to enter the fray.
So Julie, did you want to come in on that specific point?
I was just going to say, whilst we are looking what others are doing, obviously at the moment, as Krishni says, you know, there isn't a NHS wide, so we're re-evaluating what we want, working in co-production with around what we want as an organisation, because it's some years since we set this up, and things have changed a lot, haven't they, even during the pandemic. So we're reviewing what we want out of this type of patient feedback contract. And that is going next week, I understand, to discussions, as we're entering that the next stage of the procurement process.
Thanks, Julie. Can I just check, did anyone else want to come in on this particular point? Jean?
Yeah, it's just to let the board know that we're actually using I Want Great Care in the community resilience pillar in ICANN for the Aging Well teams, and also some of the groups that we're running, you know, as in Get Up and Go, and some of those groups is something that has been absolutely endorsed by the patient advisory group who run along ICANN. And of course, Linda is fully aware of that, and that will go into the thought process around the continuation of I Want Great Care.
Thanks, Jean. I mean, this is, you know, obviously not a comment in relation to the procurement, but just in terms of the value of a live feedback tool. So, I mean, I think that there's a big difference for me between a complaint, you know, patient opinion that comes, you know, surveys on what our patients think months and sometimes, frankly, what feels like a year later to the incident happening, to the sort of sense of, I think, the value of what feels like a much more live and active patient feedback tool that we literally, I mean, I have the opportunity to see the email that Hugh sends out every month with the feedback. So it's live, it feels real and something that's happening there and then, and we can respond to it. And for me, the reason why I shared it with the National Director for Improvement in NHS England is I think that has helped a culture of continuous improvement, because if you get that feedback and it's quick and it's easy to respond to, I mean, not everything is easy to respond to, but you get that feedback, it's quick to see that what our patients think about the issues, actually the chance to address that quickly and move things forward feels really important to me. So if that's the bit of the tool that I really support, not saying there aren't other tools that can't do that, but I think that's the value that I think we've had from that tool. Julia.
I'm happy to default to Dave if he wants to come in first. Somebody else got their hand up? Is it just me? No.
I think Krishni's covered it. I mean,
okay.
Other brands do have patient experience measures, and that's what the team, Julie, is looking at really, so that we can look at the market in the round. It's not, I Want Great Care is obviously one particular approach, but there are others. To be clear on that.
So in which case mine was just literally a slightly different comment, just to add in that, excuse me, the Complaints Review Committee held a really useful sort of improvement workshop, again in the spirit of quality improvement and continuous improvement, facilitated by Julie. It was really inclusive of everybody involved, and I know Chris, as the lead governor, attended that and came up with all sorts of ideas, and it gave us a bit of headspace really to think about what do we need, how do we get an overview of all the complaints and all the feedback information that we receive. And I know we could have carried on talking all afternoon, but I know some actions coming out of that, hopefully, that we'll test out to try and improve our oversight, and as I say, in the spirit of continuous improvement. So it's really good. So we'll look forward to taking forward some of those recommendations. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Julia. So I think the key ask of the board is to approve the proposed trajectory for returning to 25 working days, which is set out in the paper. And I think probably the thing that we'd ask Linda is that we're reporting against our progress. I think a comment was made by Scott that in the chat that it'd be great if we, having agreed that, we could actually report our sort of progress towards that trajectory over the period of time. But can I check that the board is happy to approve that, because that's a specific ask which I think is supported, and obviously beyond that it's a general sort of provision of assurance around this very important area of feedback. So thank you very much, Linda, for another comprehensive report. Okay, we are moving on then to paper M. Linda, back over to you. Just conscious we are running a little bit over time, so we might need to speed up our discussions collectively to land our meeting on time, but important area, Linda, so please don't shortcut the focus on this. Over to you.
Thank you, Krishni. So with regards to the Workforce Safeguards report, just to mention some key areas. So one of the risks that has been included is around our winter plans. So when we look at the recovering independence beds, so we are the lead for this integrated model. So we're looking at the recruitment of quite a number of staff to fill certain posts. So whilst it's positive that will be increased bed capacity across Northamptonshire, then it's also a huge knock-on when it comes to staffing these areas. Other risks that are included are not new, and these were previously brought forward, but they're being highlighted because of the continuing pressures and challenges for those areas. We've also included within this report a section that we thought would be useful to highlight. So we've previously reported just on workforce risks around our ops areas, but we've now included corporate staffing areas, clinical corporate staffing, and we'll look to increase this so that it's wide and covers all the other areas. There's still the potential for industrial action, and the ballot was deferred from opening due to the unfortunate passing away of the late Queen Elizabeth, and the ballots open next week on the 6th of October, and this will run through until the 2nd of November. Again, we'll continue to work quite closely with colleagues to find out progress on what is happening with regards to the proposed action. And that's mainly been led through the unions themselves, RCN, taking quite a forward approach with regards to that. We've highlighted within the report information on our vacancies, and just to mention that there is a lot that's being done across this trust to increase our staff coming in. Unfortunately, we've seen leavers increase, which was mentioned earlier, so I won't go into that as much. And we are having a real focus on retention of staff, including where we are speaking to staff and promoting the stay conversations rather than putting more emphasis on an exit conversation. It should also be noted that within the organization, we've had quite a lot of staff promoted, so move through the bands, which then creates vacancies within some of these posts that we're reporting now. So it's not all leaving the organization, but also some successes of colleagues being promoted. We've included information on our international recruitment for nurses. We'll also look to include information for international recruitment for medical graduates that are coming into the organization. Again, we hope you'll find this information useful. The main point to highlight is the challenge with regards to the recruitment of mental health nurses. It's not just for NHFT, this is a national issue, and we're now working with colleagues in our team and other areas to look at ways to then increase the uptake of this recruitment. There's a renewed focus around the appraisals and supervision, and again noting that it's still below our target, but actually these are areas that are being prioritized, and just to assure the board that these are areas that are being discussed within meetings throughout the organization with a lens from the execs as well as the executive management board for the directors in the organization. So with regards to this report, my ask will be to the board that they acknowledge the workforce risks together with the mitigations that we've put in place, and also to be assured that we do have processes in place that are mitigating the risks that have been escalated and highlighted, and also that there is support in place for the staff working in those areas where our staffing falls below our safer staffing numbers. I'm happy to take any comments or questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Linda. I was just going to ask about supervision, but you've commented on that as a sort of significant area of focus, because it felt like it's certainly just looking at the July data, which obviously I know would have been a point in time that looked very low. So, but you've commented on that. Are there any other questions or comments that anyone else wants to raise? No, okay. I mean, clearly we've touched on some of these, and the only one that did strike me, Linda, and this is a bit of a point of detail, so I wouldn't normally ask this question at this level of detail, but because it just said the home enteral feeding team numbers are now at unsafe levels, I particularly felt the need to sort of just pick up on that. I'm sure that in the mitigations and controls people are kind of addressing that, but it did feel like quite a stark comment. So I just wondered whether you could just provide some assurance that we're not operating unsafely, particularly in that team, but I don't know whether that's something you can comment on.
Yeah, so this comment really is to do with the workload, with the caseload numbers. So where we're seeing increased demand for a service, then those numbers on the caseloads, they do increase to an unsafe level for those practitioners. But we do manage that, and certainly the services do try to then support those clinicians who are holding these caseloads as best as possible, including those risk reviews that are then taken for each individual patient.
Thank you, Linda. That's helpful to note. Okay, so I mean, clearly there's no easy sort of position on this, is it? Clearly, workforce risk remains high, and I think you've just wanted to again be report that openly to the board, which I think is important. And clearly there are mitigating actions in place identified within the report. And we're just really asked to accept the assurance that the processes are in place to continually review this and make sure that the teams out there are being supported appropriately. So if there's no other comments, can I take it the board is asked to is happy to note that and happy to understand what the report is identifying. Good, thank you, Linda. Finally then, the COVID and flu delivery plan, which is paper N.
Thank you, Krishni. So with regards to our COVID and flu, this year we've combined COVID and flu to have one working group that is looking at COVID and flu. So I'll take it that the paper has been read, and one of the things that I just wanted to highlight are around, firstly, with regards to COVID. So with regards to COVID, we have shared comms in the trust around staff booking through the national portal. This week, Jean has been very helpful in supporting us to scope out having more of our staff vaccinators, then link in with the flu clinic so that we can administer the COVID vaccination to staff whilst we are running the clinic. So we are exploring that. We do need to have more vaccinators trained to then be able to administer the COVID vaccine at the same time as the flu vaccinations. We've used for the flu, we've got clinic dates that have been put up, and these are just the first ones where we will try to get as many colleagues as possible to have their flu vaccination, including having an incentive for staff to then have that. What we are also prioritizing is the vaccinations of COVID for our inpatients, and that is being led the same way that we did that earlier on in the year and last year. So that is in hand. There's also the plans that for any of the vaccinations that remain, instead of us having waste, these can then be administered to staff who will be working within those areas. There's a comms plan, and we're very grateful to our comms colleagues who have supported us in putting this together to ensure that information is cascaded to the teams, including regular updates to staff through the staff room and various things that will be done just to drum up the support for colleagues to be able to have their vaccinations. I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Thank you, Linda. Any comments or questions from colleagues? Julia?
Thanks, Christian. You know, Linda, great report. Just to commend all the actions. I know that, you know, sometimes a few lines summary doesn't really tell the whole story of how much is actually going on behind the scenes. And I applaud your efforts to try and take the vaccines closer to where people work, and peer vaccinators, you know, the increase on those from last year. So totally commend all your actions.
Thanks, Julia. Oh, I think we lost the last bit of that, Julia. You accidentally went on mute, but I think we got the gist of what you were saying. Thank you. AJ?
I thank you, Krishna. I just wanted to bring board's attention to the fact that in terms of access to data about staff receiving vaccinations beyond NHFT, access to national reporting systems has changed significantly this year compared to last year because of the changing landscape we're in around COVID and how information governance is being used across the range of systems. So we have actually developed a self-reporting app for staff to register their vaccinations if they've had them elsewhere for flu and COVID. But I think the risk with that is we're now relying on staff doing that in terms of being able to report uptake effectively, but working very closely with comms and through the group that we've got to make sure we maximise opportunities to do that anyway.
Thanks, AJ. Good. It was good to see that innovation, because you know these are the sorts of things that we need to do. I suppose I just had one very kind of broad question, and I you know, I'm sure the answer is there's no magic bullet with all of these things, but I'm conscious that over the last couple of years we've really struggled to meet our target, having been very successful. And actually being the best regional performer only, what, 3 years ago, I think. So I remember that because I was in the room when the regional director sort of commended us for our performance. So, and then we've struggled during the COVID period. So I just wondered what's different this year that might help us to get closer to that 70%, or at least try and achieve that 70%. Is there anything we're trying that's different, just to be really clear in my mind, that will help us?
Yeah, so one of the things that came up, Krishni, within the group was that, so for last year, when we talk of flu, staff were having to book the appointment. And unfortunately, when there were changes to the clinic, the information couldn't then be shared out as quickly enough through comms. So this year, it's a drop-in. People can just pop in. You don't need to book. If you want to book, you can. So that's made it far much easier. We're also doing other things where we are sort of highlighting with key people in those areas so that they can then support in drumming up more people to then come in and have their flu vaccinations. We're maximizing opportunities where there are groups. So where there's, you know, sort of a large group of people having some form of training or something that's happening, we will have our vaccinators then come to those groups to then give them the vaccine, to then administer the vaccine. So what we're trying to do is to optimize as much as possible. Some of the things won't be new, but we'll be doing more of it than what we did previously.
Thanks very much, Linda. And I think that sort of going to where the people are approach has worked well for us in the past. It's just, I think, been always difficult, hasn't it, during the COVID period, because people haven't been together to the same extent. So sounds good. And David says he's already trialed the app and it works well. So that's a good bit of feedback as well. So we are happy to support the proposals. And obviously, I would obviously encourage you know, certainly non-executives, I know board members as a whole, I think we need to set the right example by having our vaccinations done and reporting them appropriately. So I'd certainly encourage us to do that, to sort of demonstrate our commitment and leadership. So thank you very much, Linda. So we support those proposals and you know, hope that we can improve our performance on that. Okay, we come to the end of our quality section. We move on then to finance and performance. So as ever, the first item is the assurance report from the performance committee. So Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm conscious of the fact that we're challenged a bit on time, so I've tried to sort of abbreviate the detail I was going to cover, and also just see if there's anything else in questions. So looking at the report itself, there's a number of areas contained within the report that are being described as amber from an assurance perspective. So that covers the ORR, performance dashboard, workforce dashboard and agency spend. And we also have an area which is described as red, which is our period for financial performance. What I wanted to try and draw out here is I wanted to call out the fact that we did get a lot of assurance in terms of the depth of work and planning that's going on in response to the various ambers. That's already come out in a lot of the dialogue that we've had this morning, so I don't want to repeat it again. But specifically, we had Jean bring forward some detail in response to how we're planning to impact on MSK and ADHD services waiting lists, which was very insightful. However, I'd say probably across the piece and not specifically in relation to that feedback that Jean gave us, the plans haven't yet fully delivered and turned around the challenging position. So as a consequence of that, it just felt the appropriate thing to say that we are not yet fully assured, and therefore amber was the right thing to do. But I didn't want to have that translate into a lack of confidence in the plans themselves. In terms of the red and the financial performance, well, you know, the narrative says that, you know, there will be significant challenges both at trust and ICB level to achieve a break-even position this year. And I know we've already, you know, discussed this both here and with governors at COG. But I think one of the other elements that we felt was pertinent was that, you know, Performance Committee itself was right on the cusp of going into a system-wide review with NHS England, which was talking about how a break-even position was going to be achieved. And it felt inappropriate for us to flag it as anything else other than a red, because we would have been giving a position back into NHSE, which was perhaps inappropriately optimistic. And as a consequence of that, you know, we felt that reporting it as a red was actually a supportive action in this context. Final thing I wanted to, in the interest of time, Krishna, the final thing I wanted to pull out was just wanted to give recognition to the progress that's being made in the development of the integrated performance dashboard. I know it's included in the pack. It's the next section. I won't go into an enormous amount of depth in it, but, you know, I think I would have to say that on behalf of the committee, really impressed by the use of the, you know, and depth of adoption of SPCs. The report itself is concise, it's transparent, and you know, it's a real enhancement on how things are moving forward in this particular area. As ever, given that we have a challenging environment, we might not always tell us a story we want to hear in every area, but that in itself is extremely valuable on that basis. So I wanted to recognise Dave and others that have put the hard work into enhancing that report. In the interest of time, Krishna, I was going to leave it there, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Scott. Any comments or questions to Scott, or just observations on anything that Scott has said? No. Okay, thank you very much, Scott. Very clear reflection on the report. So we move on then to the integrated performance report, which Scott has already alluded to. So I think it's over to Dave for that.
Yeah, thanks, Krishna. Thanks, Scott, for the kind words, and echo those for AJ and Joe and the team that are getting their heads around the SPC and the BI function. So that's fantastic. Just some highlights. I guess we talked about some of the waiting list challenges that we have in terms of MSK and incomplete pathways in ADHD last time. We are making some inroads now in mitigating some of that, particularly around MSK, with some local plans for developing, well, short-term and medium to long-term plans for developing a gym resource, potentially in partnership with the acute group. That's work that Jean and others are helping coordinate with Paul Sheldon. At the QRSM, which I mentioned at the start, there was a focus specifically on Advaria beds. We had about 300 odd bed days that were at Advaria. We now have a recovery trajectory through to the end of March to bring that down to 0. It's not 300 people, by the way, it's 300 bed days, so it's about 17 to 21 people. And that should begin to ameliorate that. We've also signed an agreement that repatriations within 24 hours will be escalated by the chief exec, so there's a kind of a double layer of assurance in terms of managing out of area. On the integrated dashboard, I guess just some areas to draw your attention to. We talked about turnover earlier as part of something that we have some concerns about, and that's a particular focus through the exec groups that Chris mentioned earlier, and we'll be bringing something back to the board as an update on what we're doing, particularly in that space. So going beyond the stay conversations to something much more robust. And early evidence from looking at other areas is that there is an issue with how Agenda for Change is being, the new pay scales are being interpreted by people. It is creating quite a fluid, dynamic workforce market with people moving to try and achieve and move earlier onto increment scale. So I think there is a bit of policy and context which we will need to capture as part of the turnover review that Chris will do. Some good news on our waiting list. The numbers are beginning to now come down. We haven't got a sustained period of time to judge whether that's a trend, but it's certainly less than it was last year by a reasonable number, and that's really positive to finally see that beginning to move in a different direction. And would be, of course, be really important for teams as well, understanding that their hard work is beginning to have an impact. In terms of the overall trust waiting lists, we are now beginning to see over 92% of people seeing within 18 weeks, which is brilliant, frankly. It's the standard we aspire to, and I'm really pleased to see that in place. In terms of the failure metrics, we don't feel we're going to be able to recover IAPT this year, but we are putting everything into it to try and make as good a go of it as possible. We do feel we have quite a blended approach for supporting people across the county, so we don't perceive this to be a failure in us being able to deliver good mental health care. It is simply the service model as configured is not one that our population are seeking to take up, and getting numbers through to it is proving difficult, and that's seen in other parts of the Midlands. So we're looking at that. We've got recovery groups in place for each of these areas where we believe we're on a failing trajectory. The ICT response, the partnership work with EMAS continues to work quite well, and that's a feature of our winter planning. And the rest of the report I'll leave for colleagues to come back to me on anything that they want to question or query.
Thank you, Dave. Really helpful. Any questions or comments for Dave, or more broadly for colleagues on performance? Melanie?
Hi. Yeah, I don't want to delve too much into the detail, and as Scott has already said, really welcome the evolution of the whole report and the dashboard and the addition of all this new rich way of trying to see the wood from the trees, if you like. I had a particular question on the CAMHS crisis response within 48 hours, and a sort of that leads me to a sort of a broader question, I guess, around how we make sure we are allocating the right rating and icons. So I use this sort of, first of all, I mean, it's concerning, of course, because CAMHS in the first 48 hours is an area of real concern. I note the sort of the performance in month reducing from the previous month, but we're maintaining an amber rating. And then I look at the detail in the main body of the report. Sorry, while I just flick through the slides, which is on, actually I've got no idea what page it is on Diligent, so which is the graph which shows that since February we've been coming down below target, and that trajectory is kind of coming down, but we still class it as a sort of a hit or miss. It may not. So I guess there's a question behind that around sort of, just as we get used to these icons, you know, how can we make sure that we are absolutely accurate and looking at the trend as well as just the month performance and how we allocate. But then also crisis response within 48 hours, obviously recovery plans in place, but just an area of real concern.
Well, I mean, I think we're learning as we go along with the SPC work.
I understand.
There are, it's not as pure as we might like it to be. There are some flaws in SPC in terms of the control measures and how they're set. So we just need to be cautious and mindful of those. On the crisis response within 4 hours, it's not actually yet breaching the control measure, but when you actually look at whether we feel it's good that 60% of people will be seen within 48 hours compared to the target, then obviously not. And we've got a narrative about how we're approaching that using therapists in school and so on. But Jean wants to come in, so if I could bring Jean in at this point.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues we've got on that, Melanie, particularly is around some of the data capture and the understanding of the teams in terms of when they are recording something as that referrer has been seen and treated. And that's a piece of work that Janisa, as our waiting list manager, is linking in with the teams to do. We've already also identified that what they're not doing very well, or as well as we would like, is stepping off into some of the other CAM services. So there's absolutely loads of work that Itai and I are involved with the teams in terms of some of those pathways. I'm not overly concerned at the moment. I think that children are seeing the data perhaps just doesn't reflect that, but we will continue to monitor it.
Thank you, and that's reassuring to hear, Jean. I appreciate that. And Dave, I guess my final reflection would be there's a difficulty, isn't there, in terms of whether you are measuring versus target or against your control. And I think we just always have to be really clear. Are we trying to hit the target, or are we satisfied that we're in our control range? And what are we actually measuring and sort of responding to in this report? So want to reflect on, not to debate now in the interest of time, Krishni, but
Thank you, Melanie. I mean, I'm assuming some of that should be resolved by the methodology. I mean, this isn't something the methodology itself should define how we work with this data. So actually it's that's sort of my understanding of it anyway, but a brief comment might be helpful. I think I can see AJ nodding as well. So Dave?
I mean, we're measuring on the target, but the control gives us a sense of whether we're consistently going to fail that target or consistently meet it. But as I say, I think we need to go through the next 6 months of this report and just see how those controls feel, because as I say, there are some controls that we might feel don't reflect the reality, that they're too comfortable. We might want something that's a bit more tight. And we have to do that iteratively. It's not something we can, and scientifically, because it is a statistical process.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, this is about whether the level of variation is is normal or something we should be concerned about. That's a sort of simple thing, isn't it? That's the interpretation. But obviously, we've got to get the data right. I mean, I think Jean's point about making sure the data quality is there to support that, I think, is also really important. AJ, did you want to make a final comment on that?
I would only echo what Dave has said, and in terms of the controls, it's the historic data that we're inputting into the established algorithms that set the controls, and then you would have to manually make a decision if you're testing an intervention or something that you're doing in terms of changing those control measures. So at the moment, all of the controls are established because that's the history of the data in terms of where it's setting our information. But yes, it's the target that we're measuring ultimately.
Yeah, thanks, AJ. Okay, so work in progress, and I think, you know, for all of us to kind of develop our understanding and get our data right, etc. But really helpful developments, and I think it aids the clarity of the reporting. So thank you very much to colleagues involved in that. Okay, so I think we're moving on then to item 14, which is the final sort of formal report we have, which is the highlight report from the LPT and NHFT joint working group. David, is there anything you wanted to bring to our attention from that?
I was only just going to flag 3 very quick things, which are the medium rated ones, and in a similar way to Scott's discussion, they're medium rated because of things like complexity as opposed to kind of concerns over working through them. 2 of them are interlinked, and what we have identified is it'd be really helpful to have a joint board to board of everybody together, which we're going to look sometime in Q4 of this financial year, so the very start of the new calendar year. And then the other one we've identified there working through is how do we do value-based healthcare, and using CAMHS inpatients across the East Midlands as a way of starting some work. So Paul, as the Chief Finance Officer, supporting that. That gets rated medium as well because of the complexity of bringing together information across organisations.
Thank you, David. I'm just conscious that on item 10, we were obviously anticipating to have, which is our Together Against Racism, we were anticipating that a workshop would have taken place jointly between us. Is it worth noting what our plan is for re-establishing that?
We're rearranging that, and that, I can't remember off the top of my head, it's a date in November. And the reason I can't remember it is it clashes with
November,
thank you. We've just moved International Men's Day because International Men's Day was going to be our guest speakers were going to be on the same day. So we're just shifting that a little bit so that it's later in the week.
Okay, so important to note that, because obviously that was something we were all looking forward to, but unfortunately we had to postpone that. And I think more generally, I think worth highlighting that one of the discussions at the Joint Working Group was actually the value of a further board development session beyond Together Against Racism, but a broader discussion between the two boards in the new year, I think, David. So I think worth just highlighting that, because it felt that it would be timely for us to reflect together on what else we might want to do going into another financial year. So other than that, David, I think it's just for noting for the board and approval really that of actions, etc., that are included. Yeah,
correct.
Great. No comments or questions for David beyond that? Okay, thank you. So we now have item 15 is our NHFT board declaration of interest register, which is just really there for us to note with our obviously just to remind colleagues that we need to make sure we keep that up to date as a live document. So if there are any things to update, please let the corporate governance team know. So on any other business, I really just wanted to comment that it is actually Fiona Barr's last public meeting of the board, as Fiona will be moving on before the next board. So I just want to take the opportunity to recognise everything Fiona's contributed formally to our board, and I'm sure Chris will want to add to this. So, but obviously as chair, I work pretty closely with Fiona, and I really just wanted to take the opportunity to recognise her contribution to all the things we've been doing over the last few years. Chris?
Yeah, I just want to add to that, Krishni, just to thank Fiona for all her hard work and support to the organisation. I think she's done a huge amount of work with the governors in particular. That's moved on to another level. I think the work the trust does with the governors. And I know she's worked really closely with non-exec director colleagues and directors, giving a lot of support and advice. And we've really benefited from her enormous expertise, which she has. And I know that her new trust will be getting someone who can bring that to them. No doubt give them some challenge as well as support, which will be really positive. So just a big thank you from me to Fiona, and to wish her good luck in her new role. She really has contributed a lot, and in particular, I think that corporate governance expertise has been really, really important to the trust. So big thank you from me.
Thank you very much, Chris. And obviously Fiona's with us for a bit longer. It's just this will be her last public board, so it just felt like an important opportunity to make that comment. Saqib?
So yeah, I'd also like to thank Fiona, obviously as audit chair, for the support that she's given me since onboarding as a new NED. Am I able to raise another AOB as well?
Yes, please do.
So it was just on the Molly Russell case that has been in the news this week, and I just wanted to know whether there are any learnings or for our child and adolescent mental health services from that, and also how we interact with children in terms of feedback from a safeguarding point of view in the light of that.
So I don't know if everyone will be familiar with the case, but I think it's about social media. If that's the case, that, you know, the effect of social media on children and children's mental health. So I don't know if anyone is able to make a comment about that, or Jean?
I think there is a huge amount of learning. I think there'll be more learning as we find out more as the case continues. I think one of the key things that we're really pleased about in Northamptonshire is that we do have the mental health in schools, which was not about at the time. So I think that's really important because it identifies and supports young people really early on, and also offers advice in terms of social media. If you look at some of our websites, it does have advice in terms of social media, but it's a massive concern. And we've certainly seen that in the past in terms of some of the snowball effects of young people accessing social media. But absolutely, we'll continue to look at that in terms of extra thoughts that we could develop within the NHFT.
Thank you. Thanks, Jean. Great. So we come to our snapshot review of board performance. I think it was, I think there were some really helpful comments about the developments around our risk register, weren't there? So I think worth just reminding ourselves that we'd actually recognised that earlier on in the meeting. There were, beyond that, I mean, any comments about the content? I mean, this is probably the earliest moment at which I've got to come to a snapshot review. So that in itself feels very positive from a personal point of view, to actually have time to do a snapshot review of the board's performance. But it would be useful to have any comments or reflections. So Scott?
Yeah, just to add, Kirsty, I actually think that the sort of revised structure of the agenda was interesting today. I think it helped. And I think it, just helped provide a bit better focus around some areas as well. So certainly from my part, I would support that as a development. I thought it was quite interesting, and that always assists, I think, in making sure that everybody, is contributing as well as they can to the various different areas. So yeah, I was supportive of that.
Good, thanks, Scott. Melanie?
Yeah, echo Scott's comment in terms of supporting the agenda approach. But also just wanted to emphasise, and I'm sure everyone would agree, just having the patient stories back on the agenda, the patient and staff contribution at the start of the meeting is just so welcomed and important. And, I'm pleased to see that we're able to get that thoroughly back on every agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Melanie. I think I was reflecting on that. It's so powerful, isn't it? And that was, again, inspirational, much as the previous Crisis House story was. It's great to connect, great way of connecting with our staff, our, people who are using our services, and actually, understanding some of the challenges and opportunities that might present. So very well chosen, Jean, and we're relying on you to keep us, kind of supplied with these great stories, and opportunities for learning, as well as reflection on positive things. Julia.
Thanks, Christy. Yeah, I agree with absolutely all of that. The other thing that really struck me today is that every single conversation, I know it normally happens, but I suppose I've noticed it more today. Everything always comes back to service users, patients and the staff, because we can't look after people or help people without staff. And I know there's a lot going on for everybody at the moment, but, we keep huge thanks to all the staff constantly, but I think the huge focus on quality and patients and staff today, and I think I go back to Scott's point, I think the structuring of the agenda has enabled that conversation to happen. So totally agree with all of those, and yes, for the patient story. And equally, we've really learned a lot from when things haven't gone so well as well, and there's been some great stories come through where we've had to learn a lot and take forward some improvements. So good balance today. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia. Really helpful reflections, everybody. And I think, you know, it sounds like we'll take that small change that we've made to the agenda forward. But obviously, there are a lot of other things that were on our improvement proposals, which I know Richard has circulated following the board workshop today. So, you know, there's a lot of other things that we're going to be working on. But I think these small changes, you know, it is in the spirit of continuous improvement that we you know, we'll continue to focus on kind of making these changes to try and improve how we function, but also, you know, making sure that we're doing the right things by our staff, as Julia said, and also our patients and service users, and indeed the wider community. So thanks, everybody. And actually, as a small reward, you get 4 minutes extra for for lunch. And we reconvene for our private meeting at 1 o'clock. So look forward to seeing you then. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.